Chapter 27. 11/17/63, Sunday. Sadie wanted to do the dishes after the meal she called supper and I called dinner, but I told her to go on and pack her overnight case instead. It was small and blue with rounded corners. Your knee. My knee can stand up to a few dishes. You need to hit the road now if you want a full night's sleep. 10 minutes later, the dishes were done, my fingertips were pruny, and Sadie stood at the door. With her little bag in her hands and her hair curling around her face, she had never looked prettier to me. Jake, tell me one good thing about the future. Surprisingly few things came. Cell phones? No. Suicide bombers? Probably not. Melting ice caps? Perhaps another time. Then I grinned. I'll give you 2 for the price of 1. The Cold War is over, and the president is a black man. She started to smile, then saw I wasn't joking. Her mouth dropped open. Are you telling me there's a Negro in the White House? Yes, indeed, although in my day such folks prefer to be called African Americans. You're serious? Yes, I am. Oh, my God! A great many people said that exact thing the day after the election. Is he doing a good job? Opinions vary. If you want mine, he's doing as well as anyone could expect given the complexities. On that note, I think I'll drive back to Jody. She laughed distractedly. In a daze. She walked down the ramp, put her case in the cubby that served as her Beatles trunk, then blew me a kiss. She started to get in, but I couldn't let her go like that. I couldn't run. Dr. Perry said that was still 8 months away, maybe even a year. But I limped down the ramp as fast as I could. Wait, Sadie, wait a minute. Mr. Kenopinski was sitting next door in his wheelchair, bundled up in a jacket and holding his battery-powered Motorola in his lap. On the sidewalk, Norma Whitten was making her slow way down toward the mailbox on the corner, using a pair of wooden sticks, more like ski poles than crutches. She turned and waved to us, trying to lift the frozen side of her face into a smile. Sadie looked at me questioningly in the twilight. I just wanted to tell you something, I said. I just wanted to tell you, you're the best damn thing that ever happened to me. She laughed and hugged me. Ditto, kind sir. We kissed a long time, and might have kissed longer but for the dry clapping sound on our right. Mr. Kenopinski was applauding. Sadie pulled away but took me by the wrists. You call me, won't you? Keep me, what's that thing you say? In the loop? That's it, and I will. I had no intention of keeping her in the loop. Deke or the police either. Because you can't do this on your own, Jake. You're too weak. I know that, I said, thinking I better not be. Call me, so I know you got back safe. When her bug turned the corner and disappeared, Mr. Kenopinski said, Better mind your P's and Q's, Amberson. That one's a keeper. I know. I stayed at the foot of the driveway long enough to make sure Ms. Whitten got back from the mailbox without falling down. She made it. I went back inside. The first thing I did was to get my key ring off the top of the dresser and pick through the keys, surprised that Sadie had never shown them to me to see if they'd jog my memory. But of course, she couldn't think of everything. There were an even dozen. I had no idea what most of them went to, although I was pretty sure the Schlag opened the front door of my house in, was it Sabattis? I thought that was right, but I wasn't sure. There was one small key on the ring. Stamped on it was FC and 775. It was a safe deposit box key, all right, but what was the bank? First Commercial? That sounded bankish, but it wasn't right. I closed my eyes and looked into darkness. I waited, almost sure what I wanted would come, and it did. I saw a checkbook in a faux alligator cover. I saw myself flipping it open. This was surprisingly easy. Printed on the top check was not only my Land of Ago name, but my last official Land of Ago address. 214 West Neely Street, Apartment 1, Dallas, Texas. I thought, that's where my car got stolen from. And I thought, Oswald. The assassin's name is Oswald Rabbit. No, of course not. He was a man, not a cartoon character. But it was close. I'm coming for you, Mr. Rabbit, I said. Still coming. The phone rang shortly before 9:30. Said he was home safe. Don't suppose anything came to you, did it? I'm a pest, I know. Nothing. And you're the farthest thing in the world from a pest. She was also going to be the farthest thing in the world from Oswald Rabbit, if I had anything to do about it. Not to mention his wife, whose name might or might not be Mary, and his little girl, who I felt sure was named April. You were pulling my leg about a Negro being in the White House, weren't you? I smiled. Wait a while. You can see for yourself. 11/18/63, Monday. The Davin nurses, one old and formidable, the other young and pretty, arrived at 9 a.m. sharp. They did their thing. When the older one felt that I had grimaced, twitched, and moaned enough, she handed me a paper envelope with 2 pills in it. Pain. I don't really think. Take 'em, she said, a woman of few words. Freebies. I popped them in my mouth, cheeked them, swallowed water, then excused myself to use the bathroom. There, I spat them out. When I returned to the kitchen, the older nurse said, Good progress, don't overdo. Absolutely not. Catch them? Beg pardon? The assholes who beat you up? Not yet. Doing something you shouldn't have been doing? I gave her my widest smile, the one Christy used to say made me look like a game show host on crack. I don't remember. Dr. Ellerton came for lunch, bringing huge roast beef sandwiches, crispy French fries dripping in grease, and the promised milkshakes. I ate as much as I could manage, which was really quite a lot. My appetite was returning. Mike talked up the idea of doing yet another variety show, he said, this time to benefit you. In the end, wiser heads prevailed. A small town can only give so much. He lit a cigarette, dropped the match into the ashtray on the table, and inhaled with gusto. Any chance the police will catch the mugs who tuned up on you? What do you hear? Nothing, but I doubt it. They cleaned out my wallet, stole my car, and split. What were you doing on that side of Dallas, anyway? It's not exactly the high society part of town. Well, apparently I lived there. I don't remember. Visiting someone, maybe? Are you getting plenty of rest? Not straining the knee too much? No, although I suspected I'd be straining it plenty before much longer. Still falling asleep suddenly? That's quite a bit better. Terrific. I guess, the phone rang. That'll be Sadie, I said. She calls on her lunch break. I have to be shoving off anyway. It's great to see you putting on weight, George. Say hello to the pretty lady for me. I did so. She asked me if any pertinent memories were coming back. I knew by her delicate phrasing that she was calling from the school's main office and would have to pay Mrs. Coleridge for the long distance when she was done. Besides keeping the DCHS exchequer, Mrs. Coleridge had long ears. I told her no new memories, but I was going to take a nap and hope something would be there when I woke up. I added that I loved her. It was nice to say something that was the God's honest. Asked after Deke, wished her a good afternoon, and hung up. But I didn't take a nap. I took my car keys and my briefcase and drove downtown. I hoped to God I'd have something in that briefcase when I came back. I motored slowly and carefully, but my knee was still aching badly when I entered the First Corn Bank and presented my safe deposit box key. My banker came out of his office to meet me, and his name clicked home immediately. Richard Link. His eyes widened with concern when I limped to meet him. "What happened to you, Mr. Amberson?" "Car accident." Hoping he'd missed or forgotten the squib in the morning news police beat page. I hadn't seen it myself, but there had been one. Mr. George Amberson of Jody, beaten and mugged, found unconscious, taken to Parkland Hospital. I'm mending nicely. "That's good to hear." The safe deposit boxes were in the basement. I negotiated the stairs in a series of hops. We used our keys, and Link carried the box into one of the cubicles for me. He set it on a tiny wedge of desk, just big enough to hold it, then pointed to the button on the wall. "Just ring for Melvin when you're finished. He'll assist you." I thanked him, and when he was gone, I pulled the curtain across the cubicle's doorway. We had unlocked the box, but it was still closed. I stared at it, my heart beating hard. John Kennedy's future was inside. I opened it. On top was a bundle of cash and a litter of stuff from the Neely Street apartment, including my First Corn checkbook. Beneath this was a sheaf of manuscript bound by 2 rubber bands. "The Murder Place" was typed on the top sheet. No author's name, but it was my work. Below it was a blue notebook, the Word of Al. I held it in my hands, filled with a terrible certainty that when I opened it, all the pages would be blank. The yellow card man would have erased them. "Please, no." I flipped it open. On the first page, a photograph looked back at me. Narrow, not quite handsome face. Lips curved in a smile I knew well. Hadn't I seen it with my own eyes? It was the kind of smile that says, "I know what's going on, and you don't, you poor boob." Lee Harvey Oswald. The wretched waif who was going to change the world. Memories came rushing in as I sat there in the cubicle gasping for breath. Ivy and Rosette on Mercedes Street, last name Templeton, like Al's. The jump rope girls, my old man drives a submarine. Silent Mike, Holy Mike, at Satellite Electronics. George de Mohrenschildt ripping open his shirt like Superman. Billy James Hargis and General Edwin A. Walker. Marina Oswald, the assassin's beautiful hostage standing on my doorstep at 214 West Neely. "Please excuse, have you seen my Rupka?" The Texas School Book Depository. 6th floor. Southeast window. The one with the best view of Dealey Plaza and Elm Street, where it curved toward the triple underpass. I began shivering. I clutched my upper arms in my fists, with my arms tightly locked over my chest. It made the left one, broken by the felt-wrapped pipe, ache, but I didn't mind. I was glad. It tied me to the world. When the shakes finally passed, I loaded the unfinished book manuscript, the precious blue notebook, and everything else into my briefcase. I reached for the button that would summon Melvin, then dummy-checked the very back of the box. There, I found 2 more items. One was the cheap pawn-shop wedding ring I'd purchased to support my cover story at Satellite Electronics. The other was the red baby rattle that had belonged to the Oswald's little girl. June, not April. The rattle went into the briefcase, the ring into the watch pocket of my slacks. I would throw it away on my drive home. If and when the time came, Sadie would have a much nicer one. Knocking on glass. Then a voice. "All right? Mister? Are you all right?" I opened my eyes, at first with no idea where I was. I looked to my left and saw a uniformed beat cop knocking on the driver's side window of my Chevy. Then it came, halfway back to Eden Fallows, tired and exalted and terrified all at the same time. That "I'm going to sleep" feeling had drifted into my head. I'd pulled into a handy parking space immediately. That had been around 2 o'clock. Now, from the look of the lowering light, it had to be around 4. I cranked my window down and said, "Sorry, officer. All at once I started to feel very sleepy and it seemed safer to pull over." He nodded. Yep, booz'll do that. How many did you have before you jumped into your car?" "None. I suffered a head injury a few months ago." I swiveled my neck so he could see the place where the hair hadn't grown back. He was halfway convinced, but still asked me to exhale in his face. That got him the rest of the way. "Let me see your ticket," he said. I showed him my Texas driver's license. "Not thinking of motoring all the way back to Jody, are you?" "No, officer, just to North Dallas. I'm staying at a rehabilitation center called Eden Fallows." I was sweating. I hoped that if he saw it, he'd just put it down to a man who'd been snoozing in a closed car on a warmish November day. I also hoped, fervently, that he wouldn't ask to see what was in the briefcase on the bench seat beside me. In 2011, I could refuse such a request, saying that sleeping in my car wasn't probable cause. Hell, the parking space wasn't even metered. In 1963, however, a cop might just start rummaging. He wouldn't find drugs, but he would find loose cash, a manuscript with the word murder in its title, and a notebook full of delusional weirdness about Dallas and JFK. Would I be taken either to the nearest police station for questioning or back to Parkland for psychiatric evaluation? Did the Waltons take way too long to say goodnight? He stood there a moment, big and red-faced, a Norman Rockwell cop who belonged on a Saturday Evening Post cover. Then he handed back my license. "Okay, Mr. Amberson, go on back to this Fallows place, and I suggest you park your car for the night when you get there. You're looking peaky, nap or no nap." That's exactly what I planned to do. I could see him in my rear view as I drove away, watching. I felt certain I was going to fall asleep again before I got out of his sight. There'd be no warning this time. I'd just veer off the street and onto the sidewalk, maybe mowing down a pedestrian or 3 before winding up in the show window of a furniture store. When I finally parked in front of my little cottage with the ramp leading up to the front door, my head was aching, my eyes were watering, my knee was throbbing, but my memories of Oswald remained firm and clear. I slung my briefcase on the kitchen table and called Sadie. "I tried you when I got home from school, but you weren't there," she said. "I was worried." "I was next door, playing cribbage with Mr. Kenopensky." These lies were necessary. I had to remember that, and I had to tell them smoothly because she knew me. "Well, that's good." Then, without a pause or a change of inflection, "What's his name? What's the man's name?" Lee Oswald. She almost surprised it out of me after all. I still don't know." "You hesitated. I heard you." I waited for the accusation, gripping the phone hard enough to hurt. "This time it almost popped into your head, didn't it?" "There was something," I agreed cautiously. We talked for 15 minutes while I looked at the briefcase with Al's notes inside it. She asked me to call her later that evening. I promised I would. I decided to wait until after the Huntley-Brinkley report to open the blue notebook again. I didn't think I'd find much of practical value at this point. Al's final notes were sketchy and hurried. He'd never expected Mission Oswald to go on so long. Neither had I. Getting to the disaffected little twerp was like traveling on a road littered with fallen branches, and in the end, the past might succeed in protecting itself after all. But I had stopped dunning. That gave me hope. I had the glimmerings of a plan that might allow me to stop Oswald without going to prison or the electric chair in Huntsville. I had excellent reasons to want to remain free. The best one of all was in Jody this evening, probably feeding Deke Simmons chicken soup. I worked my way methodically through my little invalid-friendly apartment collecting stuff. Other than my old typewriter, I didn't want to leave a trace of George Amberson behind when I left. I hoped that wouldn't be until Wednesday, but if Sadie said that Deke was better, and she was planning to come back on Tuesday night, I'd have to speed things up, and where would I hide out until my job was done? A very good question. A trumpet blast announced the network news. Chet Huntley appeared. After spending the weekend in Florida, where he watched the test firing of a Polaris missile and visited his ailing father, President Kennedy had a busy Monday making 5 speeches in 9 hours. A helicopter, Marine One, descended while a waiting crowd cheered. The next shot featured Kennedy approaching the crowd behind a makeshift barrier, brushing at his shaggy hair with one hand and his tie with the other. He strode well ahead of the Secret Service contingent, which jogged to keep up. I watched, fascinated, as he actually slipped through a break in the barrier and plunged into the waiting mass of people, shaking hands left and right. The agents with him looked dismayed as they hurried after. "This was the scene in Tampa," Huntley continued, "where Kennedy pressed the flesh for almost 10 minutes. He worries the men whose job it is to keep him safe, but you can see that the crowd loves it. And so does he, David. For all his alleged aloofness, he enjoys the demands of politics." Kennedy was moving toward his limo now, still shaking hands and accepting the occasional lady hug. The car was a top-down convertible exactly like the one he'd ride in from Love Field to his appointment with Oswald's bullet. Maybe it was the same one. For a moment, the blurry black-and-white film caught a familiar face in the crowd. I sat on my sofa and watched as the President of the United States shook the hand of my former Tampa bookie. I had no way of knowing if Roth was correct about the SIF or just repeating a rumor, but Eduardo Gutierrez had lost a lot of weight. His hair was thinning, and his eyes looked confused as if he wasn't sure where he was or even who he was. Like Kennedy's Secret Service contingent, the men flanking him wore bulky suit coats in spite of the Florida heat. It was only a glimpse, and then the footage switched to Kennedy pulling away in the open car that left him so vulnerable, still waving and flashing his grin. Back to Huntley, his craggy face now wearing a bemused smile. "The day did have its funny side, David, as the President was entering the International Inn ballroom, where the Tampa Chamber of Commerce was waiting to hear him speak. Well, listen for yourself." Back to the footage. As Kennedy entered, waving to the standing audience, an elderly gentleman in an alpine hat and lederhosen struck up "Hail to the Chief" on an accordion bigger than he was. The President did a double-take, then lifted both hands in an amiable "holy shit" gesture. For the first time, I saw him as I had come to see Oswald, as an actual man. In the double-take and the gesture that followed it, I saw something even more beautiful than a sense of humor, an appreciation for life's essential absurdity. David Brinkley was also smiling. "If Kennedy's re-elected, perhaps that gentleman will be invited to play at the inaugural ball. Probably the beer barrel polka rather than Hail to the Chief. Meanwhile, in Geneva—" I turned off the TV, returned to the sofa, and opened Al's book. As I flipped to the back, I kept seeing that double-take and the grin, a sense of humor, a sense of the absurd. The man in the 6th-floor window of the book depository had neither. Oswald had proved it time and again, and Such a man had no business changing history. I was dismayed to find that 5 of the last 6 pages in Al's notebook dealt with Lee's movements in New Orleans and his fruitless efforts to get to Cuba via Mexico. Only the last page focused on the lead-up to the assassination, and those final notes were perfunctory. Al had no doubt had that part of the story by heart and probably figured that if I hadn't gotten Oswald by the 3rd week of November, it was going to be too late. 10/3/63. O, back in Texas. He and Marina sort of separated him. She at Ruth Payne's house. O shows up mostly on weekends. Ruth gets O a job at Book Dep through a neighbor, Buell Frazier. Ruth calls O a fine young man. O living in Dallas during the work week, rooming house. 10/17/63. O starts work at Dep, shifting books, unloading trucks, etc. 10/18/63. O turns 24. Ruth and Marina give him a surprise party. O thanks them, cries. 10/20/63. Second daughter born, Audrey, Rachel. Ruth takes Marina to Hosp, Parkland, while O works. Rifle stored in Payne garage, wrapped in blanket. O repeatedly visited by FBI agent James Hosty. Stokes his paranoia. 11/21/63. O comes to Payne house, begs Marina to reunite. M refuses. Last straw for O. 11/22/63. O leaves all his money on dresser for Marina, also wedding ring. Goes from Irving to Book Dep with Buell Frazier. Has package wrapped in brown paper. Buell asks about it. Curtain rods for my new apartment, O tells him. Man Kark rifle probably disassembled. Buell parks in public lot 2 blocks from Book Dep, 3-minute walk. 11:50 a.m. O constructs sniper's nest on southeast corner of 6th floor, using cartons to shield him from workers on other side, who are laying down plywood for new floor. Lunch, no one there but him, everyone watching for Prez. 11:55 a.m. O assembles and loads Man Kark. 12:29 p.m. Motorcade arrives, Dealey Plaza. 12:30 p.m. O shoots 3 times. 3rd shot kills JFK. The piece of information I most wanted, the location of Oswald's rooming house, wasn't in Al's notes. I restrained an urge to throw the notebook across the room. Instead, I got up, put on my coat, and went outside. It was nearly full dark, but a 3/4 moon was rising in the sky. By its light, I saw Mr. Kenopensky slumped in his wheelchair. His Motorola was in his lap. I made my way down the ramp and limped over. "Mr. K, all right?" For a moment he didn't answer or even move, and I was sure he was dead. Then he looked up and smiled. "Just listening to my music, son. They play swing at night on KMAT, and it really takes me back. I could Lindy and bunny hop like nobody's biz back in the old days, though you'd never know to look at me now. Ain't the moon purty?" It was big-time purty. We looked at it a while without speaking, and I thought about the job I had to do. Maybe I didn't know where Lee was staying tonight, but I knew where his rifle was. Ruth Payne's garage, wrapped in a blanket. Suppose I went there and took it. I might not even have to break in. This was the land of a go, where folks in the hinterlands often didn't lock their houses, let alone their garages. Only, what if Al was wrong? He'd been wrong about the stash point before the Walker attempt, after all. Even if it was there. "What are you thinking about, son?" Mr. Kennepinsky asked. "You got a misery look. Not girl trouble, I hope?" "No, at least not yet." "Do you give advice?" "Yes, sir, I do. It's the one thing old coots are good for, when they can't swing a rope or ride a line no more." "Suppose you knew a man was going to do a bad thing, that his heart was absolutely set on it. If you stopped a man like that once, talked him out of it, say, do you think he'd try it again? Or does that moment pass forever?" "Hard to say. Are you maybe thinking whoever scarred your young lady's face is going to come back and try to finish the job?" "Something like that." "Crazy fella." It wasn't a question. Yes. "Sane men will often take a hint," Mr. Kennepinsky said. "Crazy men rarely do. Saw it often back in the sagebrush days before electric lights and phones. Warn 'em off, they come back. Beat 'em up, they hit from ambush. First you, then the one they're really after. Jug 'em up in county, they sit and wait to get out. Safest thing to do with crazy men is put 'em in the penitentiary for a long stretch, or kill 'em." "That's what I think, too." "Don't let him back to spoil the rest of her pretty, if that's what he aims to do. If you care for her as much as you seem to, you've got a responsibility." I certainly did, although Clayton was no longer the problem. I went back to my little modular apartment, made strong black coffee, and sat down with a legal pad. My plan was a little clearer now, and I wanted to start fleshing in the details. I doodled instead, then fell asleep. When I woke up, it was almost midnight, and my cheek ached where it had been pressed against the checked oilcloth covering the kitchen table. I looked at what was on my pad. I didn't know if I'd drawn it before going to sleep or if I had wakened long enough to do it and just couldn't remember. It was a gun. Not a Mannlicher Carcano rifle, but a pistol. My pistol. The one I'd tossed beneath the porch steps at 214 West Neely. It was probably still there. I hoped it was still there. I was going to need it. 11/19/63, Tuesday. Sadie called in the morning and said Deke was a little better, but she intended to make him stay home tomorrow as well. Otherwise, he'll just try to come in and have a setback. But I'll pack my bag before I leave for school tomorrow morning and head your way as soon as Period 6 is over. Period 6 ended at 1:10 That meant I'd have to be gone from Eden Fallows by 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, at the latest. If only I knew where. I look forward to seeing you. You sound all stiff and funny. Are you having one of your headaches? A little one, I said. It was true. Go lie down with a damp cloth over your eyes. I'll do that. I had no intention of doing that. Have you thought of anything? I had, as a matter of fact. I thought that taking Lee's rifle wasn't enough, and shooting him at the Payne house was a bad option, not just because I'd probably be caught either. Counting Ruth's too, there were 4 kids in that house. I might still have tried it if Lee had been walking from a nearby bus stop, but he'd be riding with Buell Frazier, the neighbor who'd gotten him the job at Ruth Payne's request. No, I said, not yet. We'll think of something. You wait and see. I drove, still slowly but with increasing confidence, across town to West Neely, wondering what I'd do if the ground floor apartment was occupied. Buy a new gun, I supposed, but the .38 Police Special was the one I wanted, if only because I'd had one just like it in Derry, and that mission had been a success. According to newscaster Frank Blair on the Today Show, Kennedy had moved on to Miami, where he was greeted by a large crowd of Cubanos. Some held up signs reading "Viva JFK," while others carried a banner reading "Kennedy is a traitor to our cause." If nothing changed, he had 72 hours left. Oswald, who had only slightly longer, would be in the book depository, perhaps loading cartons into one of the freight elevators, maybe in the break room drinking coffee. I might be able to get him there, just walk up to him and plug him, but I'd be collared and wrestled to the floor. After the kill shot, if I was lucky. Before, if I wasn't. Either way, the next time I saw Sadie Dunhill, it would be through glass reinforced with chicken wire. If I had to give myself up in order to stop Oswald, to sacrifice myself, in hero speak, I thought I could do that. But I didn't want it to play out that way. I wanted Sadie and my pound cake, too. There was a pot barbecue on the lawn at 214 West Neely and a new rocking chair on the porch, but the shades were drawn, and there was no car in the driveway. I parked in front, told myself that bold is beautiful, and mounted the steps. I stood where Marina had stood on April 10th, when she came to visit me, and knocked as she had knocked. If someone answered the door, I'd be Frank Anderson, canvassing the neighborhood on behalf of the Encyclopedia Britannica. I was too old for grit. If the lady of the house expressed an interest, I'd promised to come back with my sample case tomorrow. No one answered. Maybe the lady of the house also worked. Maybe she was down the block visiting a neighbor. Maybe she was in the bedroom that had been mine not long ago, sleeping off a drunk. It was mixed knocks to me, as we say in the land of ago. The place was quiet, that was the important thing, and the sidewalk was deserted. Even Mrs. Alberta Hitchinson, the walker-equipped neighborhood sentry, wasn't in evidence. I descended from the porch in my limping side-saddle fashion, started down the walk, turned as if I'd forgotten something, and peered under the steps. The .38 was there, half buried in leaves, with the short barrel poking out. I got down on my good knee, snagged it, and dropped it into the side pocket of my sport coat. I looked around and saw no one watching. I limped to my car, put the gun in the glove compartment, and drove away. Instead of going back to Eden Fallows, I drove into downtown Dallas, stopping at a sporting goods store on the way to buy a gun cleaning kit and a box of fresh ammo. The last thing I wanted was to have the .38 misfire or blow up in my face. My next stop was the Adolphus. There were no rooms available until next week, the doorman told me. Every hotel in Dallas was full for the president's visit. But for $1 tip, he was more than happy to park my car in the hotel lot. "Have to be gone by 4, though. That's when the heavy check-ins start." By then it was noon. It was only 3 or 4 blocks to Dealey Plaza, but I took my sweet time getting there. I was tired, and my headache was worse in spite of a Goody's powder. Texans drive with their horns, and every blast dug into my brain. I rested often, leaning against the sides of buildings and standing on my good leg, like a heron. An off-duty taxi driver asked if I was okay. I assured him that I was. It was a lie. I was distraught and miserable. A man with a bum knee really shouldn't have to carry the future of the world on his back. I dropped my grateful butt onto the same bench where I'd sat in 1960, only days after arriving in Dallas. The elm that had shaded me then clattered bare branches today. I stretched out my aching knee, sighed with relief, then turned my attention to the ugly brick cube of the book depository. The windows overlooking Houston and Elm Streets glittered in the chilly afternoon sun. "We know a secret," they said. "We're going to be famous, especially the one on the southeast corner of the 6th floor. We're going to be famous, and you can't stop us." A sense of stupid menace surrounded the building, and was it just me who thought so? I watched several people cross Elm to pass the building on the other side, and thought not. Lee was inside that cube right now. And I was sure he was thinking many of the things I was thinking. Can I do this? Will I do this? Is it my destiny? Robert's not your brother anymore, I thought. Now I'm your brother, Lee. Your brother of the gun. You just don't know it. Behind the depository in the train yard, an engine hooted. A flock of band-tailed pigeons took wing. They momentarily whirled above the Hertz sign on the roof of the depository, then wheeled away toward Fort Worth. If I killed him before the 22nd, Kennedy would be saved, but I'd almost certainly wind up in jail or a psychiatric hospital for 20 or 30 years. But if I killed him on the 22nd, perhaps as he assembled his rifle, waiting until so late in the game would be a terrible risk, and one I'd tried with all my might to avoid, but I thought it could be done and was now probably my best chance. It would be safer with a partner to help me run my game, but there was only Sadie, and I wouldn't involve her. Not even, I realized bleakly, if it meant that Kennedy had to die, or I had to go to prison. She'd been hurt enough. I began making my slow way back to the hotel to get my car. I took one final glance back at the book depository over my shoulder. It was looking at me. I had no doubt of it. And of course it was going to end there. I'd been foolish to imagine anything else. I had been driven toward that brick hulk like a cow down a slaughterhouse chute. 11/20/63, Wednesday. I started awake at dawn from some unremembered dream, my heart beating hard. She knows. Knows what? That you've been lying to her about all the things you claim not to remember. No, I said. My voice was rusty with sleep. Yes. She was careful to say she was leaving after period 6 because she doesn't want you to know she's planning to leave much sooner. She doesn't want you to know until she shows up. In fact, she might be on the road already. You'll be halfway through your morning therapy session, and in she'll breeze. I didn't want to believe this, but it felt like a foregone conclusion. So where was I going to go? As I sat there on the bed in that Wednesday morning's first light, that also seemed like a foregone conclusion. It was as if my subconscious mind had known all along. The past has resonance. It echoes. But first, I had one more chore to perform on my used typewriter, an unpleasant one. November 20th, 1963. Dear Sadie, I have been lying to you. I think you've suspected that for quite some time now. I think you're planning to show up early today. That is why you won't see me again until after JFK visits Dallas, the day after tomorrow. If things go as I hope, we'll have a long and happy life together in a different place. It will be strange to you at first, but I think you'll get used to it. I'll help you. I love you, and that's why I can't let you be a part of this. Please believe in me. Please be patient, and please don't be surprised if you read my name and see my picture in the papers. If things go as I want them to, that will probably happen. Above all, do not try to find me. All my love, Jake. P.S. You should burn this. I packed my life as George Amberson into the trunk of my gull-wing Chevy, tacked a note for the therapist on the door, and drove away feeling heavy and homesick. Sadie left Jody even earlier than I'd thought she might, before dawn. I departed Eden Fallows at 9. She pulled her Beetle up to the curb at 1:15, read the note canceling the therapy session, and let herself in with the key I'd given her. Propped against the typewriter's roller bar was an envelope with her name on it. She tore it open, read the letter, sat down on the sofa in front of the blank television, and cried. She was still crying when the therapist showed up, but she had burned the note, as I requested. Mercedes Street was mostly silent under an overcast sky. The jump rope girls weren't in evidence. They'd be in school, perhaps listening raptly as their teacher told them all about the upcoming presidential visit. But the for rent sign was once more tacked to the rickety porch railing, as I'd expected. There was a phone number. I drove down to the Montgomery Ward warehouse parking lot and called it from the booth near the loading dock. I had no doubt that the man who answered with a laconic, "Yep, this is Merritt," was the same guy who had rented 2703 to Lee and Marina. I could still see his Stetson hat and gaudy stitched boots. I told him what I wanted, and he laughed in disbelief. "I don't rent by the week. That's a fine home there, partner." "It's a dump," I said. "I've been inside, I know." "Now wait just a doggone—" "No, sir, you wait. I'll give you $50 to squat in that hole through the weekend. That's almost a full month's rent, and you can put your sign back in the window come Monday." "Why would you—" "Because Kennedy's coming and every hotel in Dallas-Fort Worth is full. I drove a long way to see him, and I don't intend to camp out in Fair Park or on Dealey Plaza." I heard the click and flare of a cigarette lighter as Merritt thought this over. "Time's wasting," I said. "Tick-tock. What's your name, partner?" "George Amberson." I sort of wished I'd moved in without calling at all. I almost had. But a visit from the Fort Worth PD was the last thing I needed. I doubted if the residents of a street where chickens were sometimes blown up to celebrate holidays gave much of a shit about squatters. But better safe than sorry. I was no longer just walking around the House of Cards. I was living in it. "I'll meet you out front in half an hour or 45 minutes. "I'll be inside," I said. "I have a key." More silence. Then, "Where'd you get it?" I had no intention of peaching on Ivy, even if she was still in Moselle. "From Lee Oswald. He gave it to me so I could go in and water his plants." "That little pissant had plants?" I hung up and drove back to 2703. My temporary landlord, perhaps motivated by curiosity, arrived in his Chrysler only 15 minutes later. He was wearing his Stetson and fancy boots. I was sitting in the front room, listening to the argumentative ghosts of people who were still living. They had a lot to say. Merritt wanted to pump me about Oswald. Was he really a damn communist? I said no. He was a good old Louisiana boy who worked at a place that would overlook the president's motorcade on Friday. I said I hoped that Lee would let me share his vantage point. "Fucking Kennedy," Merritt nearly shouted. "Now he's a communist for sure. Somebody ought to shoot that sumbitch till he can't wiggle." "You have a nice day now," I said, opening the door. He went, but he wasn't happy about it. This was a fellow who was used to having tenants kowtow and cringe. He turned on the cracked and crumbling concrete walk. "You leave the place as nice as you found it now, you hear?" I looked around at the living room, with its moldering rug, cracked plaster, and one broke-down easy chair. "No problem there," I said. I sat back down and tried to tune into the ghosts again. Lee and Marina, Marguerite, and de Mohrenschildt. I fell into one of my abrupt sleeps instead. When I woke up, I thought the chanting I heard must be from a fading dream. "Charlie Chaplin went to France just to see the ladies dance." It was still there when I opened my eyes. I went to the window and looked out. The jump rope girls were a little taller and older, but it was them all right. The terrible trio. The one in the middle was spotty, although she looked at least 4 years too young for adolescent acne. Maybe it was rubella. "Salute to the cap'n," "Salute to the Queen," I muttered, and went into the bathroom to wash my face. The water that belched out of the tap was rusty, but cold enough to wake me the rest of the way up. I had replaced my broken watch with a cheap Timex and saw it was 2:30. I wasn't hungry, but I needed to eat something, so I drove down to Mr. Lee's Barbecue. On the way back, I stopped at a drugstore for another box of headache powders. I also bought a couple of John D. MacDonald paperbacks. The jump rope girls were gone. Mercedes Street, ordinarily raucous, was strangely silent. Like a play before the curtain goes up on the last act, I thought. I went in to eat my meal, but although the ribs were tangy and tender, I ended up throwing most of them away. I tried to sleep in the main bedroom, but in there, the ghosts of Lee and Marina were too lively. Shortly before midnight, I relocated to the smaller bedroom. Rosette Templeton's Crayola girls were still on the walls, and I somehow found their identical jumpers. Forest green must have been Rosette's favorite crayon, and big black shoes comforting. I thought those girls would make Sadie smile, especially the one wearing the Miss America crown. "I love you, honey," I said, and fell asleep. 11/21/63, Thursday. I didn't want breakfast any more than I'd wanted dinner the night before, but by 11 a.m. I needed coffee desperately. A gallon or so seemed about right. I grabbed one of my new paperbacks, Slam the Big Door, it was called, and drove to the Happy Egg on Braddock Highway. The TV behind the counter was on, and I watched a news story about Kennedy's impending arrival in San Antonio, where he was to be greeted by Lyndon and Lady Bird Johnson. Also to join the party, Governor John Connally and his wife, Nellie. Over footage of Kennedy and his wife walking across the tarmac of Andrews Air Force Base in Washington, heading for the blue and white presidential plane, a correspondent who sounded like she might soon pee in her underwear talked about Jackie's new soft hairdo, set off by a jaunty black beret, and the smooth lines of her belted two-piece shirt dress by her favorite designer, Oleg Cassini. Cassini might indeed be her favorite designer, but I knew Mrs. Kennedy had another outfit packed away on the plane. The designer of that one was Coco Chanel. It was pink wool, accessorized by a black collar, and, of course, there was a pink pillbox hat to top it off. The suit would go well with the roses she'd be handed at Love Field, not so well with the blood which would splatter the skirt and her stockings and shoes. I went back to Mercedes Street and read my paperbacks. I waited for the obdurate past to swat me like a troublesome fly, for the roof to fall in or a sinkhole to open and drop 2703 deep into the ground. I cleaned my .38, loaded it, then unloaded it and cleaned it again. I almost hoped I would disappear into one of my sudden sleeps. It would at least pass the time, but that didn't happen. The minutes dragged by, turning reluctantly into a stack of hours, each one bringing Kennedy that much closer to the intersection of Houston and Elm. No sudden sleeps today, I thought. That will happen tomorrow. When the critical moment comes, I'll just drop into unconsciousness. The next time I open my eyes, the deed will have been done and the past will have protected itself. It could happen. I knew it could. If it did, I'd have a decision to make. Find Sadie and marry her, or go back and start all over again. Thinking about it, I found there was really no decision to be made. I didn't have the strength to go back and start over. One way or another, this was it. The trapper's last shot. That night, the Kennedys, Johnsons, and Connollys ate dinner in Houston at an event put on by the League of Latin American Citizens. The cuisine was Argentinian, ensalada rusa, and the stew, known as guiso, Jackie made the after-dinner speech, in Spanish. I ate takeout burgers and fries, or tried to. After a few bites, that meal also went into the garbage can out back. I had finished both of the MacDonald novels. I thought about getting my own unfinished book out of the trunk of my car, but the idea of reading it was sickening. I ended up just sitting in the half-busted armchair until it was dark outside. Then I went into the little bedroom where Rosette Templeton and June Oswald had slept. I lay down with my shoes off and my clothes on, using the cushion from the living room chair as a pillow. I'd left the door open and the light in the living room burning. By its glow, I could see the Crayola girls in their green jumpers. I knew I was in for the sort of night that would make the long day I had just passed seem short. I'd lie here wide awake, my feet hanging over the end of the bed almost to the floor until the first light of November 22nd came filtering in through the window. It was long. I was tortured by what-ifs, should-have-beens, and thoughts of Sadie. Those were the worst. The missing her and wanting her went so deep it felt like physical sickness. At some point, probably long after midnight, I'd given up looking at my watch. The slow movement of the hands was too depressing. I fell into a sleep that was dreamless and profound. God knows how long I would have slept the next morning if I hadn't been awakened. Someone was shaking me gently. "Come on, Jake, open your eyes." I did as I was told, although when I saw who was sitting beside me on the bed, I was at first positive I was dreaming after all. I had to be. But then I reached out, touched the leg of her faded blue jeans, and felt the fabric under my palm. Her hair was tied up, her face almost devoid of makeup, the disfigurement of her left cheek clear and singular. It was Sadie. She had found me. Chapter 28. 11/22/63. Friday. I sat up and embraced her without even thinking about it. She hugged me back as hard as she could. Then I kissed her, tasting her reality, the mingled flavors of tobacco and Avon. The lipstick was fainter. In her nervousness, she'd nibbled most of it away. I smelled her shampoo, her deodorant, and the oily funk of tension sweat beneath it. Most of all, I touched her, hip and breast, and the scarred furrow of her cheek. She was there. What time is it? My trusty Timex had stopped. 8:15. Are you kidding? It can't be. It is, and I'm not surprised even if you are. How long has it been since you got anything but the kind of sleep where you just pass out for a couple of hours? I was still trying to deal with the idea that Sadie was here, in the Fort Worth house where Lee and Marina had lived. How could it be? In God's name? How? And that wasn't the only thing. Kennedy was also in Fort Worth at this very minute, giving a breakfast speech to the local Chamber of Commerce at the Texas Hotel. "My suitcase is in my car," she said. "Will we take the Beetle to wherever we're going, or your Chevy?" "The Beetle might be better. It's easier to park. We may have to pay a lot for a space even so, if we don't go right now. The scalpers are already out waving their flags. I saw them." "Sadie," I shook my head in an effort to clear it and grabbed my shoes. I had thoughts in my head, plenty of them, but they were whirling around like paper in a cyclone, and I couldn't catch a single one. "I'm here," she said. Yes, that was the problem. "You can't come with me. It's too dangerous. I thought I explained that, but maybe I wasn't clear enough. When you try to change the past, it bites. It'll tear your throat out if you give it the chance." "You were clear, but you can't do this alone. Face reality, Jake. You've put on a few pounds, but you're still a scarecrow. You limp when you walk, and it's a bad limp. You have to stop and rest your knee every 200 or 300 steps. What would you do if you had to run?" I said nothing. I was listening, though. I wound and set my watch as I did it. "And that's not the worst of it. Yikes, what are you doing?" I had grabbed her thigh. making sure you're real. I still can't quite believe it. Air Force One was going to touch down at Love Field in a little over 3 hours, and someone was going to give Jackie Kennedy roses. At her other Texas stop, she'd been given yellow ones, but the Dallas bouquet was going to be red. I'm real and I'm here. Listen to me, Jake, the worst thing isn't how badly you're still banged up. The worst thing is the way you have of fallen suddenly asleep. Haven't you thought of that? I'd thought of it a lot. If the past is as malevolent as you say it is, what do you think is going to happen if you do succeed in getting close to the man you're hunting before he can pull the trigger? The past wasn't exactly malevolent. That was the wrong word, but I saw what she was saying and had no argument against it. You really don't know what you're getting yourself into. I absolutely do. And you're forgetting something very important. She took my hands and looked into my eyes. I'm not just your best girl, Jake, if that's what I still am to you. That's exactly why it's so goddamn scary having you turn up like this. You say a man's going to shoot the president, and I have reason to believe you based on the other things that you've predicted that have come true. Even Deke's half persuaded. He knew Kennedy was coming before Kennedy knew it, he said. Right down to the day and the hour, and he knew the missus was coming along for the ride. But you say it as if you were the only person who cared. You're not. Deke cares. He would have been here if he wasn't still running a fever of 101, and I care. I didn't vote for him, but I happen to be an American, and that makes him not just the president, but my president. Does that sound corny to you? No. Good. Her eyes were snapping. I have no intention of letting some crazy person shoot him, and I have no intention of falling asleep. Sadie, let me finish. We don't have much time, so you need to dig out your ears. Are they dug? Yes'm. Good. You are not getting rid of me. Let me repeat, not. I'm going. If you won't let me into your Chevy, I'll follow you in my Beetle. Jesus Christ, I said, and didn't know if I was cursing or praying. If we ever get married, I'll do what you say as long as you're good to me. I was raised to believe that's a wife's job. Oh, ye child of the 60s, I thought. I'm ready to leave everything I know behind and follow you into the future because I love you and because I believe that future you talk about is really there. I'll probably never give you another ultimatum, but I'm giving you one now. You do this with me, or you don't do it at all. I thought about this, and carefully, I asked myself if she meant it. The answer was as clear as the scar on her face. Sadie, meanwhile, was looking at the Crayola girls. Who do you suppose drew these? They're actually quite good. Rosette did them, I said. Rosette Templeton. She went back to Moselle with her mama after her daddy had an accident. And then you moved in? No, across the street, a little family named Oswald moved in here. Is that his name, Jake? Oswald? Yes. Lee Oswald. Am I coming with you? Do I have a choice? She smiled and put her hand on my face. Until I saw that relieved smile, I had no idea of how frightened she must have been when she shook me awake. No, honey, she said, not that I can see. That's why they call it an ultimatum. We put her suitcase in the Chevrolet. If we stopped Oswald and weren't arrested, we could get her Beetle later, and she could drive it back to Jody where it would look normal and at home in her driveway. If things didn't go well, if we failed or succeeded only to find ourselves on the hook for Lee's murder, we'd simply have to run for it. We could run faster, farther, and more anonymously in a V8 Chevy than in a Volkswagen Beetle. She saw the gun when I put it into the inside pocket of my sport coat and said, "No, outside pocket." I raised my eyebrows. "Where I can get at it if you all at once get tired and decide to take a nap." We went down the walk, Sadie hitching her purse over her shoulder. Rain had been forecast, but it looked to me as if the prognosticators would have to take a penalty card on that one. The sky was clearing. Before Sadie could get in on the passenger side, a voice from behind me spoke up. "That your girlfriend, mister?" I turned. It was the jump rope girl with the acne. Only it wasn't acne, it wasn't rubella, and I didn't have to ask why she wasn't in school. She had chicken pox. "Yes, she is." "She's purty, except for the—" She made a geek sound that was, in a grotesque way, sort of charming. "On her face." Sadie smiled. My appreciation for her sheer guts continued to go up, and it never went down. "What's your name, honey?" "Sadie," the jump rope girl said. "Sadie Van Owen, what's yours?" "Well, you're not going to believe this, but my name's Sadie, too." The kid eyed her with a mistrustful cynicism that was all Mercedes Street riot girl. "No, it's not." "It really is. Sadie Dunhill." She turned to me. "That's quite a coincidence, wouldn't you say, George?" I wouldn't, actually, and I didn't have time to discuss it. "Need to ask you something, Miss Sadie Van Owen. You know where the buses stop on Winscott Road, don't you?" "Sure." She rolled her eyes as if to ask, "How dumb do you think I am?" "Say, have you two had the chicken pox?" Sadie nodded. "Me too," I said. "So, we're okay on that score. Do you know which bus goes into downtown Dallas?" "The number 3. "And how often does the 3 run?" "I think every half hour, but it might be every 15 minutes. Why you want the bus when you got a car? When you got 2 cars?" I could tell by Big Sadie's expression that she was wondering the same thing. "I've got my reasons, and by the way, my old man drives a submarine." Sadie Van Owen cracked a huge smile. "You know that one?" "Known it for years," I said. "Get in, Sadie, we need to roll." I checked my new watch. It was 20 minutes to 9. "Tell me why you're interested in the buses," Sadie said. "First, tell me how you found me. When I got to Eden Fallows and you were gone, I burned the note as you asked, then checked with the old guy next door. Mr. Kennepenski. Yes, he didn't know anything, but then the therapist lady was sitting on your steps. She wasn't happy to find you gone. She said she'd traded with Doreen, so Doreen could see Kennedy today." The Winscott Road bus stop was ahead. I slowed to see if there was a schedule inside the little shelter next to the post, but no. I pulled into a parking space 100 yards ahead of the stop. "What are you doing?" "Taking out an insurance policy. If a bus doesn't come by 9, we'll go on. Finish your story." "I called the hotels in downtown Dallas, but nobody even wanted to talk to me. They're all so busy. I called Deke next, and he called the police, told them he had reliable information that someone was going to shoot the president." I'd been watching for the bus in my rearview mirror, but now I looked at Sadie in shock. Yet I felt reluctant admiration for Deke. I had no idea how much of what Sadie had told him he actually believed, but he'd gone way out on a limb just the same. What happened? Did he give his name? He never got the chance. They hung up on him. I think that's when I really started to believe you about how the past protects itself. And that's what all this is to you, isn't it? Just a living history book. Not anymore. Here came a lumbering bus, green over yellow. The sign in the destination window read 3 Main Street, Dallas, 3. It stopped, and the doors at the front and back flapped open on their accordion hinges. 2 or 3 people got on, but there was no way they were going to find seats. When the bus rolled slowly past us, I saw that all of them were full. I glimpsed a woman with a row of Kennedy buttons pinned to her hat. She waved at me gaily, and although our eyes met for only a second, I could feel her excitement, delight, and anticipation. I dropped the Chevy into gear and followed the bus. On the back, partially obscured by belching brown exhaust, a radiantly smiling Clairol girl proclaimed that if she only had one life, she wanted to live it as a blonde. Sadie waved her hand theatrically. "Ugh, drop back, it stinks." "That's quite a criticism coming from a pack-a-day chick," I said, but she was right. The diesel stench was nasty. I fell back. There was no need to tailgate now that I knew Sadie Jump Rope had been right about the number. She'd probably been right about the interval, too. The buses might run every half hour on ordinary days, but this was no ordinary day. "I did some more crying because I thought you were gone for sure. I was scared for you. But I hated you, too." I could understand that, and still feel I'd done the right thing, so it seemed best to say nothing. I called Deke again. He asked me if you'd ever said anything about having another bolt hole, maybe in Dallas, but probably in Fort Worth. I said I didn't remember you saying anything specific. He said it probably would have been while you were in the hospital and all confused. He told me to think hard, as if I wasn't. I went back to Mr. Konopensky on the chance you might have said something to him. By then it was almost supper time and getting dark. He said no, but right about then his son came by with a pot roast dinner and invited me to eat with them. Mr. K got talking. He has all kinds of stories about the old days. "I know." Up ahead, the bus turned east on Vickery Boulevard. I signaled and followed it, but stayed far enough back so we didn't have to eat the diesel. I've heard at least 3 dozen blood-on-the-saddle stuff. Listening to him was the best thing I could have done, because I stopped racking my brains for a while, and sometimes when you relax, things let go and float to the surface of your mind. While I was walking back to your little apartment, I suddenly remembered you saying you lived for a while on Cadillac Street. Only you knew that wasn't quite right. Oh, my God, I forgot all about that. It was my last chance. I called Deke again. He didn't have any detailed city maps, but he knew there were some at the school library. He drove down, probably coughing his head off. He's still pretty sick. Got them and called me from the office. He found a Ford Avenue in Dallas and a Chrysler Park and several Dodge streets, but none of them had the feel of a Cadillac, if you know what I mean. Then he found Mercedes Street in Fort Worth. I wanted to go right away, but he told me I'd have a much better chance of spotting you or your car if I waited until morning. She gripped my arm. Her hand was cold. "Longest night of my life, you troublesome man. I hardly slept a wink." "I made up for you, although I didn't finally go under until the wee hours. If you hadn't come, I might have slept right through the damn assassination." How dismal would that be for an ending? Mercedes goes on for blocks. I drove and drove. Then I could see the end at the parking lot of some big building that looks like the back of a department store. Close. It's a Montgomery Ward warehouse. And still no sign of you. I can't tell you how downhearted I was. Then, she grinned. It was radiant in spite of the scar. Then I saw that red Chevy with the silly tail fins that looked like a woman's eyebrows, bright as a neon sign. I shouted and pounded the dashboard of my little Beetle until my hand was sore. And now, here I am. There was a low, crunching bang from the right front of the Chevy, and suddenly we were veering at a lamppost. There was a series of hard thuds from beneath the car. I spun the wheel. It was sickeningly loose in my hands, but I got just enough steerage to avoid hitting the post head-on. Instead, Sadie's side scraped it, creating a ghastly metal-on-metal screech. Her door bowed inward, and I yanked her toward me on the bench seat. We came to a stop with the hood hanging over the sidewalk and the car listing to the right. That wasn't just a flat tire, I thought. That was a mortal fucking injury. Sadie looked at me, stunned. I laughed. As previously noted, sometimes There's just nothing else you can do." "Welcome to the past, Sadie," I said. "This is how we live here." She couldn't get out on her side. It was going to take a crowbar to pry the passenger door open. She slid the rest of the way across the seat and got out on mine. A few people were watching, not many. "Gee, what happened?" a woman pushing a baby carriage asked. That was obvious once I got around to the front of the car. The right front wheel had snapped off. It lay 20 feet behind us at the end of a curving trench in the asphalt. The jagged axle stub gleamed in the sun. "Busted wheel," I told the woman with the baby carriage. "Oh, law," she said. "What do we do?" Sadie asked in a low voice. "We took out an insurance policy. Now we file a claim. Nearest bus stop." "My suitcase." Yes, I thought, and Al's notebook. My manuscripts, the shitty novel that doesn't matter, and the memoir that does. Plus, my available cash. I glanced at my watch. 9:15. At the Texas hotel, Jackie would be dressing in her pink suit. After another hour or so of politics, the motorcade would be on the move to Carswell Air Force Base, where the big plane was parked. Given the distance between Fort Worth and Dallas, the pilots would barely have time to put their wheels up. I tried to think. "Would you like to use my phone to call someone?" the woman with the baby carriage asked. "My house is right up the street." She scanned us, picking up on my limp and Sadie's scar. "Are you hurt?" "We're fine," I said. I took Sadie's arm. "Would you call a service station and ask them to tow it? I know it's a lot to ask, but we're in a terrible hurry." "I told him that front end was wobbly," Sadie said. She was pouring on the Georgia drawl. "Thank goodness we weren't on the highway." "There's an Esso about 2 blocks up," she pointed north. "I guess I could stroll the baby over there." "Oh, that would be a lifesaver, ma'am," Sadie said. She opened her purse, removed her wallet, and took out a 20. "Give them this on account. Sorry to ask you like this, but if I don't see Kennedy, I will just die." That made the baby carriage woman smile. "Goodness, that much would pay for 2 tows. If you have some paper in your purse, I could scribble a receipt." "That's okay," I said. "We trust you. But maybe I'll put a note under the wiper." Sadie was looking at me questioningly, but she was also holding out a pen and little pad with a cross-eyed cartoon kid on the cover. "School days," it said below his loopy grin. "Dear old golden snooze days." A lot was writing on that note, but there was no time to think about the wording. I jotted rapidly and folded it under the wiper blade. A moment later, we were around the corner and gone. "Jake, are you okay?" "Fine, you?" "I got bumped by the door and I'll probably have a bruise on my shoulder, but otherwise, yes. If we'd hit that post, I probably wouldn't have been. You either. Who was the note for?" "Whoever tows the Chevy. And I hope to God Mr. Whoever would do as the note asked. We'll worry about that part when we come back. If we came back." The next bus pole was halfway up the block. 3 black women, 2 white women, and a Hispanic man were standing by the post, a racial mixture so balanced it looked like a casting call for Law and Order SVU. We joined them. I sat on the bench inside the shelter next to a 6th woman, an African-American lady whose heroic proportions were packed into a white rayon uniform that practically screamed well-to-do white folks' housekeeper. On her bosom, she wore a button that read, "All the way with JFK in 64. "Bad legs, sir?" she asked me. "Yes." I had 4 packets of headache powder in the pocket of my sport coat. I reached past the gun, got 2 of them, tore off the tops, and poured them into my mouth. "Taking them that way will box your kidneys around," she said. "I know, but I got to keep this leg going long enough to see the president." She broke into a large smile. "Don't I hear that?" Sadie was standing on the curb and looking anxiously back down the street for a number 3. "Bus is running slow today," the housekeeper said, "but one be along directly. No way I'm missing Kennedy. 9:30 came, and still no bus, but the ache in my knee was down to a dull throb. God bless Goody's powder. Sadie came over. "Jake, maybe we ought to—" "Here come a 3, the housekeeper said, and rose to her feet. She was an awesome lady, dark as ebony, taller than Sadie by at least an inch, hair planked straight and gleaming. "Howee! I'm going to get me a place right there in Dealey Plaza. Got sandwiches in my bag. And will he hear me when I yell?" "I bet he will," I said. She laughed. "You better believe he will. Him and Jackie both." The bus was full, but the folks from the bus stop crammed on anyway. Sadie and I were the last, and the driver, who looked as harried as a stockbroker on Black Friday, held out his palm. "No more. I'm full. Got 'em crammed in like sardines. Wait for the next one." Sadie threw me an agonized look, but before I could say anything, the large lady stepped in on our behalf. You let 'em on. The man, he got a bum leg, and the lady got her own problems, as you can well see. Also, she's skinny, and he's skinnier. You let 'em on, or I'm going to put you off and drive this bus myself. I can do it, too. I learned on my daddy's bulldog." The bus driver looked at her, looming over him, then rolled his eyes and beckoned us aboard. When I reached for coins to stick in the fare box, he covered it with a meaty palm. "Never mind the damn fare. Just get behind the white line if you can." He shook his head. "Why they didn't put on a dozen extra buses today, I don't know." He yanked the chrome handle, the doors flopped shut fore and aft. The air brakes let go with a chuff, and we were rolling, slow but sure. My angel wasn't done. She began hectoring a couple of working guys, one black and one white, seated behind the driver with their dinner buckets in their laps. "Get on up and give your seats to this lady and gentleman now. Can't you see he's got a bad pin? And he's still going to see Kennedy." "Ma'am, that's all right," I said. She took no notice. "Get up now. Was you raised in a woodshed?" They got up, elbowing their way into the choked throng in the aisle. The black workingman gave the housekeeper a dirty look. 1963, and I'm still giving the white man my seat." "Oh, boo-hoo," his white friend said. The black guy did a double-take at my face. I don't know what he saw, but he pointed at the now vacant seats. "Sit down before you fall down, Jackson." I sat next to the window. Sadie murmured her thanks and sat beside me. The bus lumbered along like an old elephant that can still reach a gallop if given enough time. The housekeeper hovered protectively next to us, holding a strap and swaying her hips on the turns. There was a lot of her to sway. I looked at my watch again. The hands seemed to be leaping toward 10 a.m. Soon they would leap past it. Sadie leaned close to me, her hair tickling my cheek and neck. "Where are we going, and what are we going to do when we get there?" I wanted to turn toward her, but kept my eyes front instead, looking for trouble, looking for the next punch. We were on West Division Street now, which was also Highway 180. Soon we'd be in Arlington, future home of George W. Bush's Texas Rangers. If all went well, we'd reach the Dallas city limits by 10:30, 2 hours before Oswald chambered the first round into his damned Italian rifle. Only, when you're trying to change the past, things rarely go well. "Just follow my lead," I said, "and don't relax." We passed south of Irving, where Lee's wife was now recuperating from the birth of her second child only a month ago. Traffic was slow and smelly. Half the passengers on our packed bus were smoking. Outside, where the air was presumably a little clearer, the streets were choked with inbound traffic. We saw one car with "We love you, Jackie" soaped on the back window, and another with "Get out of Texas, you commie rat" in the same location. The bus lurched and swayed. Larger and larger clusters of people stood at the stops. They shook their fists when our packed bus refused to even slow. At 10:15, we got on Harry Hines Boulevard and passed a sign pointing the way to Love Field. The accident occurred 3 minutes after that. I'd been hoping it wouldn't happen, but I had been watching for it and waiting for it, and when the dump truck drove through the stoplight at the intersection of Hines and Inwood Avenue, I was at least halfway prepared. I'd seen one like it before on my way to Longview Cemetery in Derry. I grabbed Sadie's neck and pushed her head toward her lap. Down! A second later, we were thrown against the partition between the driver's seat and the passenger area. Glass broke. Metal screamed. The standees shot forward in a yelling clot of waving limbs, handbags, and dislodged four-best hats. The white workingman, who'd said boo-hoo, was bent double over the fare machine that stood at the head of the aisle. The large housekeeper simply disappeared, buried under a human avalanche. Sadie's nose was bleeding, and there was a puffy bruise rising like bread dough under her right eye. The driver was sprawled sideways behind the wheel. The wide front window was shattered, and the forward view of the street was gone, replaced by rust-flowered metal. I could read Alice Public Were. The stench of the hot asphalt the truck had been carrying was thick. I turned Sadie toward me. "Are you all right? Is your head clear?" "I'm okay, just shaken up. If you hadn't shouted when you did, I wouldn't have been." There were moans and cries of pain from the pileup at the front of the bus. A man with a broken arm disengaged himself from the scrum and shook the driver, who rolled out of his seat. There was a wedge of glass protruding from the center of his forehead. "Oh, Christ," the man with the broken arm said. "I think he's fucking dead." Sadie got to the guy who'd hit the fare post and helped him back to where he'd been sitting. He was white-faced and groaning. I guessed that he'd been leading with his balls when he hit the post. It was just the right height. His black friend helped me get the housekeeper to her feet. But if she hadn't been fully conscious and able to help us out, I don't think we could have done much. That was 300 pounds of female on the hoof. She was bleeding freely from the temple, and that particular uniform was never going to be of further use to her. I asked if she was okay. "I think so, but I fetched my head one hell of a wallop. Lousy." Behind us, the bus was in an uproar. Pretty soon there was going to be a stampede. I stood in front of Sadie and got her to put her arms around my waist. Given the shape of my knee, I probably should have been holding on to her. But instinct is instinct. "We need to let all these people off the bus," I told the black working man. "Run the handle." He tried, but it wouldn't move. Jammed. I thought that was bullshit. I thought the past was holding it shut. I couldn't help him yank either. I only had one good arm. The housekeeper, one side of her uniform now soaked with blood, pushed past me, almost knocking me off my feet. I felt Sadie's arms jerk loose, but then she took hold again. The housekeeper's hat had come askew, and the gauze of the veil was beaded with blood. The effect was grotesquely decorative, like tiny holly berries. She reset the hat at the proper angle, then laid hold of the chrome door handle with the black workingman. "I'm going to count 3. Then we're going to pull this sucker," she told him. "You ready?" He nodded. 1, 2, 3. They yanked, or rather she did, and hard enough to split her dress open beneath one arm. The doors flopped open. From behind us came weak cheers. "Thank you," Sadie began, but then I was moving. "Quick, before we get trampled, don't let go of me." We were the first ones off the bus. I turned Sadie toward Dallas. "Let's go." "Jake, those people need help." "And I'm sure it's on the way. Don't look back. Look ahead. because that's where the next trouble will come from. How much trouble? How much more? All the past can throw at us, I said. It took us 20 minutes to make 4 blocks from where our number 3 bus had come to grief. I could feel my knee swelling. It pulsed with each beat of my heart. We came to a bench, and Sadie told me to sit down. There's no time. Sit, mister. She gave me an unexpected push, and I flopped onto the bench, which had an ad for a local funeral parlor on the back. Sadie nodded briskly, as a woman may when a troublesome chore has been accomplished, then stepped into Harry Hines Boulevard, opening her purse as she did so and rummaging in it. The throbbing in my knee was temporarily suspended as my heart climbed into my throat and stopped. A car swerved around her, honking. It missed her by less than a foot. The driver shook his fist as he continued down the block, then popped up his middle finger for good measure. When I yelled at her to come back, she didn't even look in my direction. She took out her wallet as the cars whiffed past, blowing her hair back from her scarred face. She was as cool as a spring morning. She got what she wanted, dropped the wallet back into her purse, then held a greenback high over her head. She looked like a high school cheerleader at a pep rally. $50, she shouted. $50 for a ride into Dallas. Main Street, gotta see Kennedy, $50. That isn't gonna work, I thought. The only thing that's gonna happen is she's gonna get run over by the obdurate Pat. A rusty Studebaker screamed to a stop in front of her. The engine bashed and clanged. There was an empty socket where one of the headlamps should have been. A man in baggy pants and a strap-style T-shirt got out. On his head, and pulled all the way down to his ears, was a green felt cowboy hat with an Indian feather in the band. He was grinning. The grin showcased at least 6 missing teeth. I took one look and thought, here comes trouble. "Lady, are you crazy?" the Studebaker cowboy said. "You want $50 or not? Just take us to Dallas." The man squinted at the bill, as oblivious of the swerving, honking cars as Sadie herself. He took off his hat, slapped it against the chinos hanging from his chicken-bone hips, then put it back on his head, once more pulling it down until the brim rode the tops of his jug ears. "Lady, that ain't a 50, that's a 10-spot. I've got the rest of my billfold." "Then why don't I just take it?" He grabbed at her big handbag and got one strap. I stepped off the curb, but I thought he'd have it and be gone before I could reach her. And if I did reach her, he'd probably beat me stupid. Skinny as he was, he still outweighed me, and he had 2 good arms. Sadie held on. Pulled in opposite directions, the bag gaped open like an agonized mouth. She reached inside with her free hand and came out with a butcher knife that looked familiar. She swiped at him with it and opened his forearm. The cut began above his wrist and ended at the dirty crease on the inside of his elbow. He screamed in pain and surprise, let go of the strap, and stepped back, staring at her. "You crazy bitch! You cut me!" He lunged for the open door of his car, which was still trying to beat itself to death. Sadie stepped forward and slashed the air in front of his face. Her hair had fallen in her eyes. Her lips were a grim line. Blood from the Studebaker cowboy's wounded arm pattered to the pavement. Cars continued to flow past. Incredibly, I heard someone yell, "Give him the business, lady!" The Studebaker cowboy retreated toward the sidewalk, his eyes never leaving the knife. Without looking at me, Sadie said, "Over to you, Jake." For a second I didn't understand, then remembered the .38. I took it out of my pocket and pointed it at him. "See this, Tex? It's loaded." "You're as crazy as she is." He was holding his arm against his chest now, branding his T-shirt with blood. Sadie hurried around to the Studebaker's passenger side and opened the door. She looked at me over the roof and made an impatient cranking gesture with one hand. I wouldn't have believed I could love her more, but in that moment I saw I was wrong. "You should have either taken the money or kept driving," I said. "Now let me see how you run. Do it immediately, or I'll put a bullet in your leg so you can't do it at all." "You're one fucking bastard," he said. "Yes, I am, and you're one fucking thief who will soon be sporting a bullet hole." I cocked the gun. The Studebaker cowboy didn't test me. He turned and hustled west on Hines with his head hunched and his arm cradled, cursing and spilling a blood trail. "Don't stop till you get to Love," I shouted after him. "It's 3 miles the way you're going. Say hello to the president." "Get in, Jake. Get us out of here before the police come." I slid in behind the wheel of the Studebaker, grimacing as my swollen knee protested. It was a standard shift, which meant using my bad leg on the clutch. I ran the seat back as far as it would go, hearing the litter of trash in back crunch and crackle, then got rolling. "That knife," I said, "is it the one Johnny cut me with?" "Yes. Sheriff Jones returned it after the inquest. He thought it was mine, and he was probably right, but not from my place on Beatree. I'm almost positive Johnny brought it with him from our house in Savannah. I've been carrying it in my bag ever since, because I wanted something to protect myself with, just in case." Her eyes filled. "And this is an in case, isn't it? This is an in case, if ever there was one." "Put it back in your purse." I stabbed the clutch, which was horribly stiff, and managed to get the Studebaker into second. The car smelled like a chicken coop that hadn't been cleaned in roughly 10 years. "It'll get blood on everything inside." "Put it back anyway. You can't walk around waving a knife, especially when the president's coming to town." "Honey, that was beyond brave." She put the knife away, then began wiping her eyes with her fisted hands, like a little girl who scraped her knees. "What time is it?" 10 of 11. Kennedy lands at Love Field in 40 minutes. "Everything's against us," she said. "Isn't it?" I glanced at her and said, "Now you understand." We made it to North Pearl Street before the Studebaker's engine blew. Steam boiled up from under the hood. Something metallic clanged to the road. Sadie cried out in frustration, struck her thigh with a balled fist, and used several bad words, but I was almost relieved. At least I wouldn't have to wrestle with the clutch anymore. I put the column shift in neutral and let the steaming car roll to the side of the street. It came to rest in front of an alley with "Do Not Block" painted on the cobbles. But this particular offense seemed minor to me after assault with a deadly weapon and car theft. I got out and hobbled to the curb where Sadie was already standing. "What time now?" she asked. 11:20. "How far do we have to go?" "The Texas School Book Depository is on the corner of Houston and Elm. 3 miles, maybe more." The words were no more than out of my mouth when we heard the roar of jet engines from behind us. We looked up and saw Air Force One on its descent path. Sadie pushed her hair wearily back from her face. "What are we going to do?" "Right now we're going to walk," I said. "Put your arm around my shoulders. Let me take some of your weight." "I don't need to do that, hon." But a block later, I did. We approached the intersection of North Pearl and Ross Avenue at 11:30, right around the time Kennedy's 707 would be rolling to a stop near the official greeters, including, of course, the woman with the bouquet of red roses. The street corner ahead was dominated by the Cathedral Santuario de Guadalupe. On the steps, below a statue of the saint with her arms outstretched, sat a man with wooden crutches on one side and an enamel kitchen pot on the other. Propped against the pot was a sign reading, "I am cripple up bad. Please give what you can. Be a good Samaritan. God loves you." "Where are your crutches, Jake?" "Back at Eden Fallows in the bedroom closet." "You forgot your crutches?" Women are good at rhetorical questions, aren't they? I haven't been using them that much lately. For short distances, I'm pretty much okay." This sounded marginally better than admitting that the main thing on my mind had been getting the hell away from the little rehab cluster before Sadie arrived. "Well, you could sure use a pair now." She ran ahead with enviable fleetness and spoke to the beggar on the church steps. By the time I limped up, she was dickering with him. "A set of crutches like that costs $9, and you want 50 for one?" "I need at least one to get home," he said reasonably. "And your friend looks like he needs one to get anywhere." "What about all that God loves you, be a good Samaritan stuff?" "Well," the beggar said thoughtfully, rubbing his whiskery chin, "God does love you, but I'm just a poor old cripple fella. If you don't like my terms, make like the Pharisee and pass by on the other side. That's what I'd do." "I bet you would. What if I just snatched them away, you money-grubbing thing?" "I guess you could, but then God wouldn't love you any more," he said, and burst out laughing. It was a remarkably cheerful sound for a man who was crippled up bad. He was doing better in the dental department than the Studebaker cowboy, but not a whole hell of a lot. "Give him the money," I said. "I only need one." "Oh, I'll give him the money. I just hate being screwed." "Lady, that's a shame for the male population of planet Earth, if you don't mind me saying." "Watch your mouth," I said. "That's my fiancée you're talking about." It was 11:40 now. The beggar took no notice of me. He was eyeing Sadie's wallet. "There's blood on that. Did you cut yourself shaving?" "Don't try out for the Sullivan Show just yet, sweetheart. Alan King, you're not." Sadie produced the 10 she'd flashed at oncoming traffic, plus 2 20s. "There," she said as he took them. "I'm broke. Are you satisfied?" "You helped a poor crippled man," the beggar said. "You're the one who ought to be satisfied." "Well, I'm not," Sadie shouted, "and I hope your damn old eyes fall out of your ugly head." The beggar gave me a sage guy-to-guy look. "Better get her home, Sonny Jim. I think she's going to start on her monthly right directly." I put the crutch under my right arm. People who've been lucky with their bones think you'd use a single crutch on the injured side, but that's not the case, and took Sadie's elbow with my left hand. "Come on, no time." As we walked away, Sadie slapped her jeans-clad rump, looked back over her shoulder, and cried, "Kiss it!" The beggar called, "Bring it back and bend it in my direction, honey love. That you get for free." We walked down North Pearl, or rather Sadie walked, and I crutched. It was 100 times better with the crutch, but there was no way we could make the intersection of Houston and Elm before 12:30. Up ahead was a scaffolding. The sidewalk went beneath it. I steered Sadie across the street. "Jake, why in the world?" "Because it had fall on us, take my word for it. We need a ride. We really need—" "Jake, why are you stopping?" I stopped because life is a song, and the past harmonizes. Usually those harmonies meant nothing, so I thought then. But every once in a while, the intrepid visitor to the land of ago can put one to use. I prayed with all my heart that this was one of those times. Parked at the corner of North Pearl and San Jacinto was a 1954 Ford Sunliner convertible. Mine had been red, and this one was midnight blue, but still, maybe. I hurried to it and tried the passenger door. Locked, of course. Sometimes you caught a brake, but outright freebies, never. "Are you going to jump the ignition?" I had no idea how to do that and suspected it was probably harder than they made it look on Bourbon Street Beat. But I knew how to raise my crutch and slam the armpit cradle repeatedly against the window until it broke into a cracked glaze and sagged inward. No one looked at us because there was no one on the sidewalk. All the action was to the southeast. From there we could hear the surf roar of the crowd now gathering on Main Street in anticipation of President Kennedy's arrival. The safety glass sagged. I reversed the crutch and used the rubber-tipped end to push it inward. One of us would have to sit in the back. If this worked, that was. While in Derry, I'd had a copy made of the Sunliner's ignition key and taped it to the bottom of the glove compartment, underneath the paperwork. Maybe this guy had done the same. Maybe this particular harmony extended that far. It was a thin chance, but the chance of Sadie finding me on Mercedes Street had been thin enough to read a newspaper through, and that one had panned out. I thumbed the chrome button on this Sunliner's glove compartment and began to feel around inside. Harmonize, you son of a bitch. Please harmonize. Give me a little help just this once. Jake, why would you think... My fingers happened on something, and I brought out a tin Sucrets box. When I opened it, I found not one key, but 4. I didn't know what the other 3 might open, but I had no doubt about the one I wanted. I could have found it in the dark just by its shape. Man, I loved that car. Bingo, I said, and almost fell over when she hugged me. You drive, honey. I'll sit in back and rest my knee. I knew better than to try Main Street. It would be blocked off with sawhorses and police cars. Take Pacific as far as you can. After that, use the side streets. Just keep the crowd noise on your left, and I think you'll be okay. How much time do we have? Half an hour. It was actually 25 minutes, but I thought half an hour sounded more comforting. Besides, I didn't want her to try any stunt driving and risk an accident. We still had time, theoretically at least, but one more wreck and we were finished. She didn't try any stunts, but she did drive fearlessly. We came to a downed tree blocking one of the streets, of course we did. And she bumped up over the curb, driving along the sidewalk to get past it. We made it as far as the intersection of North Record Street and Havermill. There, we could go no farther because the last 2 blocks of Havermill, right up to the point where it intersected Elm, no longer existed. It had become a parking lot. A man holding an orange flag waved us forward. $5, he said. Just a 2-minute walk to Main Street. You folks got plenty of time. Although he cast a doubtful eye at my crutch when he said it. I really am broke, Sadie said. I wasn't lying about that. I pulled out my wallet and gave the man a 5. Put it behind the Chrysler, he said. Pull up nice and tight. Sadie tossed him the keys. You pull it up nice and tight. Come on, honey. Hey, not that way, the car park guy yelled. That way's Elm. You want to go over to Main. That's the way he's coming. We know what we're doing, Sadie called. I hoped she was right. We made our way through the packed cars, Sadie in the lead. I twisted and flailed with my crutch, trying to avoid jutting outside mirrors and keep up with her. Now I could hear locomotives and clanging freight cars in the train yard behind the book depository. Jake, we're leaving a trail a mile wide. I know. I've got a plan. A gigantic overstatement, but it sounded good. We came out on Elm, and I pointed at the building across the street 2 blocks down. There. That's where he is. She looked at the squat red cube with the peering windows, then turned a dismayed, wide-eyed face to me. I observed with something like clinical interest that large, white goosebumps had broken out on her neck. Jake, it's horrible. I know. But what's wrong with it? Everything. Sadie, we have to hurry. We're nearly out of time. We crossed Elm on a diagonal, me crutching along at a near run. The biggest portion of the crowd was on Main Street, but more people filled Dealey Plaza and lined Elm in front of the book depository. They crowded the curb all the way down to the triple underpass. Girls sat on their boyfriends' shoulders. Children who might soon be screaming in panic happily smeared their faces with ice cream. I saw a man selling snow cones and a woman with a huge bouffant hairdo hawking dollar photos of Jack and Jackie in evening wear. By the time we reached the shadow of the depository, I was sweating. My armpit was hollering from the constant pressure of the crutch cradle, and my left knee had been cinched in a fiery belt. I could barely bend it. I looked up and saw depository employees leaning from some of the windows. I couldn't see anyone in the one at the southeast corner of the 6th floor, but Lee would be there. I looked at my watch. 12:20. We could track the motorcade's progress by the rising roar on Lower Main Street. Sadie tried the door, then gave me an anguished glare. Locked! Inside, I saw a black man wearing a poor boy cap tilted at a jaunty angle. He was smoking a cigarette. Al had been a great one for marginalia in his notebook, and near the end, casually jotted, almost doodled, he had written the names of several of Lee's co-workers. I'd made no effort to study these because I didn't see what earthly use I could put them to. Next to one of those names, the one belonging to the guy in the poor boy cap, I had no doubt, Al had written, "First one they suspected. Probably because black." It had been an unusual name, but I still couldn't remember it, either because Roth and his goons had beaten it out of my head, along with all sorts of other stuff, or because I hadn't paid enough attention in the first place. Or just because the past was obdurate. And did it matter? It just wouldn't come. The name was nowhere. Sadie hammered on the door. The black man in the poor boy cap stood watching her, impassively. He took a drag on his cigarette and then waved the back of his hand at her. "Go on, lady, go on." "Jake, think of something, please." 12:21. An unusual name, yes. But why had it been unusual? I was surprised to find this was something I actually knew. "Because it was a girl's," I said. Sadie turned to me. Her cheeks were flushed except for the scar, which stood out in a white snarl. "What?" Suddenly I was hammering on the glass. "Bonnie!" I shouted. "Hey, Bonnie Ray! Let us in! We know Lee! Lee! Lee Oswald!" He registered the name and crossed the lobby in a maddeningly slow amble. "I didn't know that scrawny little sumbitch had any friends," Bonnie Ray Williams said as he opened the door, then stepped aside as we rushed inside. "He probably in the break room watching for the president with the rest of—" "Listen to me," I said. "I'm not his friend, and he's not in the break room. He's on the 6th floor. I think he means to shoot President Kennedy." The big man laughed merrily. He dropped his cigarette to the floor and crushed it out with a work boot. "That little pissant wouldn't have the guts to drown a litter of kittens in a sack. All he'd do is sit in the corner and read books. I tell you, I'm going on up to 2. If you want to come with me, you're welcome, I guess. But don't be talking any more nonsense about Leela. That's what we call him, Leela. Shoot the president? Lord!" He waved his hand and ambled away. "I thought you belong in Derry, Bonnie Ray. They specialize in not seeing what's right in front of them." "Stairs," I told Sadie. "The elevator would be—" The end of any chance we might have left was what it would be. It would get stuck between floors. Stairs! I took her hand and pulled her toward them. The staircase was a narrow gullet with wooden risers sway-backed from years of traffic. There was a rusty iron railing on the left. At the foot, Sadie turned to me. "Give me the gun." "No, you'll never make it in time. I will. Give me the gun." I almost gave it up. It wasn't that I felt I deserved to keep it. Now that the actual watershed moment had come, it didn't matter who stopped Oswald as long as someone did. But we were only a step away from the roaring machine of the past, and I was damned if I'd risk Sadie taking that last step ahead of me, only to be sucked into its whirling belts and blades. I smiled, then leaned forward and kissed her. "Race you," I said, and started up the stairs. Over my shoulder I called, "If I fall asleep, he's all yours." "You folks crazy," I heard Bonnie Ray Williams say in a mildly remonstrative tone of voice. Then there was the light thud of footsteps as Sadie followed me. I crouched on the right, no longer leaning on it, but almost vaulting on it, and hauled at the railing on the left. The gun in my sport coat pocket swung and thudded against my hip. My knee was bellowing. I let it yell. When I hit the second-floor landing, I snuck a look at my watch. It was 12:25. No, 26. I could hear the roar of the crowd still approaching, a wave about to break. The motorcade had passed the intersection of Main and Irvay, Main and Ackerd, Main and Field. In 2 minutes, 3 at most, it would reach Houston Street, turn right, and roll past the old Dallas courthouse at 15 miles an hour. From that point on, the President of the United States would be an available target. In the 4x scope attached to the Mannlicher Carcano, the Kennedys and Connollys would look as big as actors on the screen at the Lisbon Drive-In. But Lee would wait a little longer. He was no suicide drone. He wanted to get away. If he fired too soon, the security detail in the car at the head of the motorcade would see the gun flash and return fire. He would wait until that car and the presidential limo made the dogleg left onto Elm. Not just a sniper, a fucking backshooter. I still had 3 minutes, or maybe just 2.5. I attacked the stairs between the second and third floor, ignoring the pain in my knee, forcing myself upward like a marathoner near the end of a long race. Which, of course, I was. From below us, I could hear Bonnie Ray yelling something that had "Crazy man" and "Say Leela gon' shoot in it." Until I was halfway up the flight to the third floor, I could feel Sadie beating on my back like a rider urging a horse to go faster, but then she fell back a little. I heard her gasping for air and thought, "Too many cigarettes, darlin'." My knee didn't hurt anymore. The pain had been temporarily buried in a surge of adrenaline. I kept my left leg as straight as I could, letting the crutch do the work. Around the bend, up to the fourth floor. Now I was gasping too, and the stairs looked steeper, like a mountain. The cradle rest at the top of the beggar's crutch was slimy with sweat. My head pounded, my ears rang with the sound of the cheering crowd below. The eye of my imagination opened wide, and I could see the approaching motorcade. The security car, then the presidential limo with the Harley-Davidson DPD motorcycles flanking it, the cops on them wearing white, chin-strapped helmets and sunglasses. Around another corner, the crutch skidding, then steadying, up again, the crutch thudding. Now I could smell sweet sawdust from the sixth-floor renovations. Workmen replacing the old plank boards with new ones. Not on Lee's side, though. Lee had the southeast side to himself. I reached the fifth-floor landing and made the last turn, my mouth open to scoop in air, my shirt a drenched rag against my heaving chest. Stinging sweat ran into my eyes, and I blinked it away. 3 book cartons stamped "Roads to Everywhere" and 4th and 5th grade readers blocked the stairs to the 6th floor. I stood on my right leg and slammed the foot of the crutch into one of them, sending it spinning. Behind me I could hear Sadie now between the 4th and 5th floors, so I'd been right to keep the gun, it seemed, although who really knew? Judging from my own experience, knowing you are the one with the primary responsibility to change the future makes you run faster. I squeezed through the gap I created. To do so, I had to put my full weight on my left leg for a second. It gave a howl of pain. I groaned and grabbed at the railing to keep from spilling forward onto the stairs. Looked at my watch. It said 12:28, but what if it was slow? The crowd was roaring. "Jake, for God's sake, hurry!" Sadie, still on the stairs to the 5th floor landing. I started up the last flight, and the sound of the crowd began to drain away into a great silence. By the time I reached the top, there was nothing but the rasp of my breath and the burning hammer strokes of my overtaxed heart. The 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository was a shadowy square, dotted with islands of stacked book cartons. The overhead lights were burning where the floor was being replaced. They were off on the side where Lee Harvey Oswald planned to make history in 100 seconds or less. 7 windows overlooked Elm Street. The 5 in the middle, large and semicircular. The ones on the ends, square. The 6th floor was gloomy around the stairhead, but filled with hazy light in the area overlooking Elm Street. Thanks to the floating sawdust from the floor project, the sunbeams slanting in through the windows looked thick enough to cut. The beam falling through the window at the southeast corner, however, had been blocked off by a stacked barricade of book cartons. The sniper's nest was all the way across the floor from me, on a diagonal that ran from northwest to southeast. Behind the barricade, in the sunlight, a man with a gun stood at the window. He was stooped, peering out. The window was open. A light breeze was ruffling his hair and the collar of his shirt. He began to raise the rifle. I broke into a shambling run, slaloming around the stacked cartons, digging in my coat pocket for the .38. "Lee!" I shouted. "Stop, you son of a bitch!" He turned his head and looked at me, eyes wide, mouth hung open. For a moment he was just Lee, the guy who had laughed and played with Junie in the bath, the one who sometimes hugged his wife and kissed her upturned face, and then his thin and somehow prissy mouth wrinkled into a snarl that showed his upper teeth. When that happened, he changed into something monstrous. I doubt you believe that, but I swear it's true. He stopped being a man and became the demonic ghost that would haunt America from this day on, perverting its power and spoiling its every good intent. If I let it. The noise of the crowd rushed in again, thousands of people applauding and cheering and yelling their brains out. I heard them, and Lee did too. He knew what it meant, now or never. He whirled back to the window and socked the rifle's butt plate against his shoulder. I had the pistol, the same one I'd used to kill Frank Dunning, not just like it. In that moment, it was the same gun. I thought so then, and I think so now. The hammer tried to catch in the pocket lining, but I dragged the .38 out, hearing cloth rip as I did so. I fired. My shot went high and only exploded splinters from the top of the window frame, but it was enough to save John Kennedy's life. Oswald jerked at the sound of the report, and the 160-grain slug from the Mannlicher Carcano went high, shattering a window in the county courthouse. There were screams and bewildered shouts from below us. Lee turned toward me again, his face a mask of rage, hate, and disappointment. He raised his rifle again, and this time it wouldn't be the President of the United States he'd be aiming at. He worked the bolt. Clack, clack. And I fired at him again. Although I was 3/4 of the way across the room, less than 25 feet away, I missed again. I saw the side of his shirt twitch, but that was all. My crutch struck a stack of boxes. I tottered to the left, flailing with my gun hand for balance, but there was no chance of that. For just a moment, I thought of how on the day I'd met her, Sadie had literally fallen into my arms. I knew what was going to happen. History doesn't repeat itself, but it harmonizes, and what it usually makes is the devil's music. This time I was the one who stumbled, and that was the crucial difference. I could no longer hear her on the stairs, but I could still hear her rapid footfalls. "Sadie, down!" I shouted, but it was lost in the bark of Oswald's rifle. I heard the bullet pass above me. I heard her cry out. Then there was more gunfire, this time from outside. The presidential limo had taken off, driving toward the triple underpass at breakneck speed, the two couples inside ducking and holding on to each other. But the security car had pulled up on the far side of Elm Street near Dealey Plaza. The cops on the motorcycles had stopped in the middle of the street, and at least 4 people were acting as spotters, pointing up at the 6th-floor window where a skinny man in a blue shirt was clearly visible. I heard a patter of thumps, a sound like hailstones striking mud. Those were the bullets that missed the window and hit the bricks above or on either side. Many didn't miss. I saw Lee's shirt billow out as if a wind had started to blow inside it, a red one that tore holes in the fabric, one above the right nipple, one at the sternum, a third where his navel would be, a fourth tore his neck open. He danced like a doll in the hazy, sawdusty light, and that terrible snarl never left his face. He wasn't a man at the end, I tell you. He was something else. Whatever gets into us when we listen to our worst angels. A bullet spanged one of the overhead lights, shattered the bulb, and set it to swaying. Then a bullet tore off the top of the would-be assassin's head, just as one of Lee's had torn off the top of Kennedy's in the world I'd come from. He collapsed onto his barricade of boxes, sending them tumbling to the floor. Shouts from below, someone yelling, "Man down! I saw him go down!" Running, ascending, footfalls. I sent the .38 spinning toward Lee's body. I had just enough presence of mind to know that I would be badly beaten, perhaps even killed by the men coming up the stairs if they found me with a gun in my hand. I started to get up, but my knee would no longer hold me. That was probably just as well. I might not have been visible from Elm Street, but if I was, they'd open fire on me. So I crawled to where Sadie lay, supporting my weight on my hands and dragging my left leg behind me like an anchor. The front of her blouse was soaked with blood, but I could see the hole. It was dead center in her chest, just above the slope of her breasts. More blood poured from her mouth. She was choking on it. I got my arms under her and lifted her. Her eyes never left mine. They were brilliant in the hazy gloom. "Jake," she rasped. "No, honey, don't talk." She took no notice, though. When had she ever? "Jake, the president, safe." I hadn't actually seen him all in one piece as the limo tore away, but I had seen Lee jerk as he fired his only shot at the street, and that was enough for me. And I would have told Sadie he was safe no matter what. Her eyes closed and opened again. The footfalls were very close now, turning from the 5th-floor landing and starting up the final flight. Far below, the crowd was bellowing its excitement and confusion. "Jake." "What, honey?" She smiled. "How we danced." When Bonnie, Ray, and the others arrived, I was sitting on the floor and holding her. They stampeded past me. How many, I don't know, 4 maybe, or 8 or a dozen. I didn't bother to look at them. I held her, rocking her head against my chest, letting her blood soak into my shirt. Dead. My Sadie. She had fallen into the machine after all. I have never been a crying man, but almost any man who's lost the woman he loves would, don't you think? Yes, but I didn't. Because I knew what had to be done. Part 6. The Green Card Man. Daily News Extra, Saturday, November 23rd, 1963. JFK escapes assassination. First Lady also okay. Panic strikes during drive through Dallas. Story, page 3. Chapter 29. I wasn't exactly arrested, but I was taken into custody and driven to the Dallas police station in a squad car. On the last block of the ride, people, some of them reporters, most of them ordinary citizens, pounded on the windows and peered inside. In a clinical, distant way, I wondered if I would perhaps be dragged from the car and lynched for attempting to murder the president. I didn't care. What concerned me most was my blood-stained shirt. I wanted it off. I also wanted to wear it forever. It was Sadie's blood. Neither of the cops in the front seat asked me any questions. I suppose someone had told them not to. If they had asked any, I wouldn't have replied. I was thinking. I could do that because the coldness was creeping over me again. I put it on, like a suit of armor. I could fix this. I would fix this. But first, I had some talking to do. They put me in a room that was as white as ice. There was a table and 3 hard chairs. I sat in one of them. Outside, telephones rang and a teletype chattered. People went back and forth talking in loud voices, sometimes shouting, sometimes laughing. The laughter had a hysterical sound. It was how men laugh when they know they've had a narrow escape. Dodged a bullet, so to speak. Perhaps Edwin Walker had laughed like that on the night of April 10th, as he talked to reporters and brushed broken glass from his hair. The same 2 cops who brought me from the book depository searched me and took my things. I asked if I could have my last 2 packets of goodies. The 2 cops conferred, then tore them open and poured them out on the table, which was engraved with initials and scarred with cigarette burns. One of them wetted a finger, tasted the powder, and nodded. "Do you want water?" "No." I scooped up the powder and poured it into my mouth. It was bitter. That was fine with me. One of the cops left. The other asked for my bloody shirt, which I reluctantly took off and handed over. Then I pointed at him. "I know it's evidence, but you treat it with respect. The blood on it came from the woman I loved. That might not mean much to you, but it's also from the woman who helped to stop the murder of President Kennedy, and that should. We only want it for blood typing." "Fine, but it goes on my receipt of personal belongings. I'll want it back." "Sure." The cop who'd left came back with a plain white undershirt. It looked like the one Oswald had been wearing, or would have been wearing, in the mugshot taken shortly after his arrest at the Texas Theater. I arrived in the little white interview room at 1:20. About an hour later, I can't say with exactitude because there was no clock and my new Timex had been taken with the rest of my personal effects. The same 2 uniforms brought me some company. An old acquaintance, in fact. Dr. Malcolm Perry, toting a large black country doctor's medical bag. I regarded him with mild astonishment. He was here at the police station visiting me because he didn't have to be at Parkland Hospital picking bits of bullet and shards of bone out of John Kennedy's brain. The river of history was already moving into its new course. "Hello, Dr. Perry." He nodded. "Mr. Amberson?" The last time he'd seen me, he'd called me George. If I'd had any doubts about being under suspicion, that would have confirmed them. But I didn't. I'd been there. And I'd known what was about to happen. Bonnie Ray Williams would already have told them as much. I understand you've re-injured that knee. Unfortunately, yes. Let's have a look. He tried to pull up my left pants leg and couldn't. The joint was too swollen. When he produced a pair of scissors, both cops stepped forward and drew their guns, keeping them pointed at the floor with their fingers outside the trigger guards. Dr. Perry looked at them with mild astonishment, then cut the leg of my pants up the seam. He looked. He touched. He produced a hypodermic needle and drew off fluid. I gritted my teeth and waited for it to be over. Then he rummaged in his bag, came out with an elastic bandage, and wrapped the knee tightly. That provided some relief. I can give you something for the pain, if these officers don't object. They didn't, but I did. The most crucial hour of my life and Sadie's was dead ahead. I didn't want dope clouding my brain when it rolled around. Do you have any Goody's headache powder? Perry wrinkled his nose as if he'd smelled something bad. I have Bayer aspirin, and Emprin. The Emprin's a bit stronger. Give me that then. And Dr. Perry? He looked up from his bag. Sadie and I didn't do anything wrong. She gave her life for her country, and I would have given mine for her. I just didn't get the chance. If so, let me be the first to thank you, on behalf of the whole country. The president, where is he now? Do you know? Dr. Perry looked at the cops, eyebrows raised in a question. They looked at each other, then one of them said, He's gone on to Austin to give a dinner speech, just like he was scheduled to do. I don't know if that makes him crazy brave or just stupid. Maybe, I thought, Air Force One was going to crash, killing Kennedy and everyone else on board. Maybe he was going to have a heart attack or a fatal stroke. Maybe some other chicken shit Bravo was going to blow his handsome head off. Did the obdurate past work against the things changed as well as against the change agent? I didn't know, nor much care. I had done my part. What happened to Kennedy from this point on was out of my hands. I heard on the radio that Jackie isn't with him, Perry said quietly. He sent her on ahead to the vice president's ranch in Johnson City. He'll join her there for the weekend, as planned. If what you say is true, George... I think that's enough, Doc, one of the cops said. It certainly was for me. To Mal Perry, I was George again. Dr. Perry, who had his share of doctor's arrogance, ignored him. If what you say is true, then I see a trip to Washington in your future, and very likely a medal ceremony in the Rose Garden. After he departed, I was left alone again, only not really. Sadie was there, too. How we danced, she'd said, just before she passed from this world. I could close my eyes and see her in line with the other girls, shaking her shoulders and doing the Madison. In this memory, she was laughing. Her hair was flying, and her face was perfect. 2011 surgical techniques could do a lot to fix what John Clayton had done to that face, but I thought I had an even better technique. If I got a chance to use it, that was. I was allowed to baste in my own painful juices for 2 hours before the door of the interview room opened again. 2 men came in. The one with the basset hound face beneath a white Stetson hat introduced himself as Captain Will Fritz of the Dallas Police. He had a briefcase, but not my briefcase, so that was all right. The other guy had heavy jowls, a drinker's complexion, and short, dark hair that gleamed with hair tonic. His eyes were sharp, inquisitive, and a little worried. From the inside pocket of his suit coat, he produced an ID folder and flipped it open. "James Hosty, Mr. Amberson. Federal Bureau of Investigation." You have good reason to look worried, I thought. You were the man in charge of monitoring Lee, weren't you, Agent Hosty? Will Fritz said, "Like to ask you a few questions, Mr. Amberson." "Yes," I said, "and I'd like to get out of here. People who save the President of the United States generally don't get treated like criminals." Now, Agent Hosty said. "We sent you a doc, didn't we? And not just any doc, your doc." "Ask your questions," I said, and got ready to dance. Fritz opened his briefcase and brought out a plastic bag with an evidence tag taped to it. Inside it was my .38. "We found this lying against the barricade of boxes Oswald set up, Mr. Amberson. Was it his, do you think?" "No, that's a police special. It's mine. Lee had a .38, but it was a Victory model. If it wasn't on his body, you'll probably find it wherever he was staying." Fritz and Hosty looked at each other in surprise, then back at me. "So you admit you knew Oswald?" Fritz said. "Yes, although not well. I didn't know where he was living, or I would have gone there." "As it happens," Hosty said, "he had a room on Beckley Street. He was registered under the name O.H. Lee. He seems to have had another alias, too, Alec Hiddell. He used it to get mail." "Wife and kiddo not with him?" I asked. Hosty smiled. It spread his jowls approximately half a mile in either direction. "Who's asking the questions here, Mr. Amberson?" "Both of us," I said. "I risked my life to save the president, and my fiancée gave hers. So I think I have a right to ask questions." Then I waited to see how tough they'd get. If real tough, they actually believed I'd been in on it. Real easy? They didn't, but wanted to be sure. It turned out to be somewhere in the middle. Fritz used a blunt finger to spin the bag with the gun in it. "I'll tell you what might have happened, Mr. Amberson. I won't say it did, but you'd have to convince us otherwise." "Uh-huh. Have you called Sadie's folks? They live in Savannah. You should also call Deacon Simmons and Ellen Doherty in Jody. They were like surrogate parents to her." I considered this. To both of us, really. I was going to ask Deke to be my best man at our wedding. Fritz took no notice of this. "What might have happened was you and your girl were in on it with Oswald, and maybe at the end you got cold feet." The ever-popular conspiracy theory, no home should be without one. "Or maybe you realized at the last minute that you were getting ready to shoot the most powerful man in the whole world," Hosty said. "You had a moment of clarity, so you stopped him. If it went like that, you'd get a lot of leniency." Yes, leniency to consist of 40, maybe even 50 years in Leavenworth eating mac and cheese instead of death in the Texas electric chair. Then why weren't we there with him, Agent Hosty, instead of hammering on the door to be let in? Hosty shrugged. You tell me. And if we were plotting an assassination, you must have seen me with him because I know you had him under at least partial surveillance. I leaned forward. Why didn't you stop him, Hosty? That was your job. He drew back as if I'd raised a fist to him. His jowls reddened. For a few moments at least, my grief hardened into a kind of malicious pleasure. The FBI kept an eye on him because he defected to Russia, re-defected to the United States, then tried to defect to Cuba. He was handing out pro-Fidel leaflets on street corners for months before this horror show today. How do you know all that? Hosty barked. because he told me. Then what happens? The president, who's tried everything he can think of to knock Castro off his perch, comes to Dallas. Working at the book depository, Lee had a ringside seat for the motorcade. You knew it and did nothing. Fritz was staring at Hosty with something like horror. I'm sure Hosty was regretting the fact that the Dallas cop was even in the room, but what could he do? It was Fritz's station. "We did not consider him a threat," Hosty said stiffly. "Well, that was certainly a mistake. What was in the note he gave you, Hosty? I know Lee went to your office and left you one when he was told you weren't there, but he wouldn't tell me what was in it. He just gave that thin little fuck you smile of his. We're talking about the man who killed the woman I loved, so I think I deserve to know. Did he say he was going to do something that would make the world sit up and take notice? I bet he did." "Oh, it was nothing like that." "Show me the note, then. Double dog dare you." "Any communication from Mr. Oswald is bureau business." "I don't think you can show it. I'll bet it's ashes in your office toilet as per Mr. Hoover's orders." If it wasn't, it would be. It was in Al's notes. "If you're such an innocent," Fritz said, "you'll tell us how you knew Oswald and why you were carrying a handgun. And why the lady had a butcher's knife with blood on it," Hosty added. I saw red at that. "The lady had blood everywhere," I shouted. "On her clothes, on her shoes, in her purse. The son of a bitch shot her in the chest. Or didn't you notice?" Fritz: "Calm down, Mr. Amberson. No one's accusing you of anything." The subtext: "Yet." I took a deep breath. "Have you talked to Dr. Perry? You sent him to examine me and take care of my knee, so you must have. Which means you know I was beaten within an inch of my life last August. The man who ordered the beating and participated in it is a bookie named Akiva Roth. I don't think he meant to hurt me as badly as he did, but probably I smarted off to him and made him mad. I can't remember. There's a lot I can't remember since that day." "Why didn't you report this after it happened?" "Because I was in a coma, Detective Fritz. When I came out of it, I didn't remember. When I did remember, some of it at least, I recalled Roth saying he was hooked up with a Tampa bookie I'd done business with, and a New Orleans mobster named Carlos Marcello. That made going to the cops seem risky." "Are you saying DPD is dirty?" I didn't know if Fritz's anger was real or faked and didn't much care. "I'm saying I watch The Untouchables and I know the mob doesn't like rats. I bought a gun for personal protection, as is my right under the Second Amendment, and I carried it." I pointed at the evidence bag. "That gun." Hosty: "Where'd you buy it?" I don't remember. Fritz: "Your amnesia is pretty convenient, isn't it? Like something on The Secret Storm or As the World Turns." "Talk to Perry," I repeated. "And take another look at my knee. I re-injured it racing up 6 flights of stairs to save the president's life, which I will tell the press. I'll also tell them my reward for doing my duty as an American citizen was an interrogation in a hot little room without even a glass of water." "Do you want water?" Fritz asked, and I understood that this could be all right if I didn't misstep. The president had escaped assassination by the skin of his teeth. These 2 men, not to mention Dallas Police Chief Jesse Curry, would be under enormous pressure to provide a hero. Since Sadie was dead, I was what they had. "No," I said, "but a Coca-Cola would be very nice." As I waited for my Coke, I thought of Sadie saying, "We're leaving a trail a mile wide." It was true, but maybe I could make that work for me. If that was a certain tow truck driver from a certain Fort Worth Esso station had done as the note under the Chevrolet's windshield wiper had asked. Fritz lit a cigarette and shoved the pack across to me. I shook my head and he took it back. "Tell us how you knew him," he said. I said I'd met Lee on Mercedes Street and we'd struck up an acquaintance. I listened to his rantings about the evils of fascist imperialist America and the wonderful socialist state that would emerge in Cuba. Cuba was the ideal, he said. Russia had been taken over by worthless bureaucrats, which is why he'd left. In Cuba, there was Uncle Fidel. Lee didn't come right out and say that Uncle Fidel walked on the water, but he implied it. I thought he was nuts, but I liked his family. That much was true. I did like his family, and I did think he was nuts. How did a professional educator, such as yourself, come to be living on the shit-ass side of Fort Worth in the first place? Fritz asked. I was trying to write a novel. I found out I couldn't do it while I was teaching school. Mercedes Street was a dump, but it was cheap. I thought the book would take at least a year, and that meant I had to stretch my savings. When I got depressed about the neighborhood, I tried to pretend I was living in a garret on the left bank. Fritz, did your savings include money you won from bookies? Me. I'm going to take the fifth on that one. At this, Will Fritz actually laughed. Hosty. So you met Oswald and became friendly with him? Relatively friendly. You don't become close buddies with crazy people. At least I don't. Go on. Lee and his family moved out. I stayed. Then one day, out of the blue, I got a call from him saying he and Marina were living on Elsbeth Street in Dallas. He said it was a better neighborhood and the rents were cheap and plentiful. I told Fritz and Hosty that I was tired of Mercedes Street by then, so I came on over to Dallas, had lunch with Lee at the Woolworths counter, then took a walk around the neighborhood. I rented the ground floor apartment at 214 West Neely Street, and when the upstairs apartment went vacant, I told Lee, kind of returning the favor. His wife didn't like the place on Elsbeth, I said. The West Neely Street building was just around the corner and much nicer, so they moved in. I had no idea how closely they would check this story, how well the chronology would hold up, or what Marina might tell them. But those things weren't important to me. I only needed time. A story that was even halfway plausible might give it to me, especially since Agent Hosty had good reason to treat me with kid gloves. If I told what I knew about his relationship with Oswald, he might spend the rest of his career freezing his ass off in Fargo. Then something happened that put my ears up. Last April, this was. Right around Easter, I was sitting at the kitchen table working on my book when this fancy car, a Cadillac, I think, pulled up and two people got out, a man and a woman, well dressed. They had a stuffed toy for Junie. She's... Fritz. We know who June Oswald is. They went up the stairs, and I heard the guy. He had a kind of German accent and a big booming voice. I heard him say, Lee, how did you miss? Hosty leaned forward, eyes as wide as they could get in that fleshy face. What? You heard me. So I checked the paper, and guess what? Someone took a shot at some retired general 4 or 5 days before. A big right-winger, just the kind of guy Lee hated. What did you do? Nothing. I knew he had a pistol. He showed it to me one day, but the paper said the guy who shot at Walker used a rifle. Besides, most of my attention was taken up by my girlfriend by then. You asked why she had a knife in her purse? The answer is simple. She was scared. She was also attacked, only not by Mr. Roth. It was her ex-husband. He disfigured her pretty badly. We saw the scar, Hosty said. And we're sorry for your loss, Amberson. Thank you. You don't look sorry enough, I thought. The knife she was carrying was the same one her ex, John Clayton was his name, used on her. She carried it everywhere. I thought of her saying, "Just in case." I thought of her saying, "This is an in case if there ever was one." I put my hands over my face for a minute. They waited. I dropped them into my lap and went on in a toneless Joe Friday voice. "Just the facts, ma'am. I kept the place on West Neely, but I spent most of the summer in Jody, taking care of Sadie. I'd pretty much given up on the book idea, was thinking about reapplying at Denholm Consolidated. Then I ran into Akiva Roth and his goons. Wound up in the hospital myself. When they let me out, I went to a rehab center called Eden Fallows. "I know it," Fritz said. "Kind of an assisted living thing?" "Yes. And Sadie was my chief assistant. I took care of her after her husband cut her. She took care of me after Roth and his associates beat me up. Things go around that way. They make, I don't know, a kind of harmony." "Things happen for a reason," Hosty said solemnly. And for a moment I felt like launching myself over the table and pummeling his flushed and fleshy face. Not because he was wrong, though. In my humble opinion, things do happen for a reason, but do we like the reason? Rarely. Near the end of October, Dr. Perry okayed me to drive short distances. This was a blatant lie, but they might not check it with Perry for a while, and if they made an investment in me as an authentic American hero, they might not check at all. I went into Dallas on Tuesday of this week, mostly on a whim. I wanted to see if looking at it would bring back some more of my memories. I had indeed gone to West Neely, but to get the gun under the porch. Afterward, I decided to get my lunch at Woolworth's, just like in the old days. And who should I see at the counter but Lee, having a tuna on rye. I sat down and asked him how it was going, and that was when he told me the FBI was harassing him and his wife. He said, "I'm going to teach those bastards not to fuck with me, George. If you're watching TV on Friday afternoon, maybe you'll see something." "Holy cow," Fritz said. "Did you connect that with the president's visit?" "Not at first. I never followed Kennedy's movements all that closely. I'm a Republican." 2 lies for the price of 1. Besides, Lee went right on to his favorite subject. "Hosty, Cuba?" "Right. Cuba and Viva Fidel." He didn't even ask why I was limping. He was totally wrapped up in his own stuff, you know. But that was Lee. I bought him a custard pudding. Boy, that's good at Woolworth's, and only $0.25. And asked him where he was working. He told me the book depository on Elm Street, said it with a big smile, as if unloading trucks and shifting boxes around was the world's biggest deal. I let most of his blather roll off my back, I went on, because my leg was hurting and I was getting one of my headaches. I drove home to Eden Fallows and took a nap, but when I woke up, the German guy's "How did you miss" crack came back to me. I put on the TV and they were talking about the president's visit. That, I said, was when I started to worry. I hunted through the pile of newspapers in the living room, found the motorcade route, and saw it went right by the book depository. I stewed about it all day Wednesday. They were leaning forward over the table now, hanging on every word. Hosty was making notes without looking down at his pad. I wondered if he'd be able to read them later. I'd say to myself, maybe he really means it. Then I'd say, no, Lee's all hat and no cattle. Back and forth like that. Yesterday morning I called Sadie, told her the whole story, and asked her what she thought. She phoned Deke Simmons, the man I called her surrogate father, then called me back. She said I should tell the police. Fritz said, I don't mean to add to your pain, son, but if you'd done that, your lady friend would still be alive. Wait, you haven't heard the whole story. Neither had I, of course. I was making up sizable chunks of it as I went. I told her and Deke no cops, because if Lee was innocent, he'd really be screwed. You have to understand that the guy was barely holding on by the skin of his teeth. Mercedes Street was a dump, and West Neely was only a little better, but that was okay for me. I'm a single man, and I had my book to work on. Plus, a little money in the bank. Lee, though, he had a beautiful wife and 2 daughters, the second one just newborn, and he could hardly keep a roof over their heads. He wasn't a bad guy. At this, I felt an urge to check my nose and make sure it wasn't growing. But he was a world-class fuck-up. Pardon my French. His crazy ideas made it hard for him to hold a job, and said when he got one, the FBI would go in and queer things for him. He said it happened with his printing job. "That's bullshit," Hosty said. "The boy blamed everyone else for problems he made himself. We agree on some things, though, Emerson. He was a world-class fuck-up. And I felt sorry for his wife and kids. Sorry as hell." Yeah, good for you. Anyway, he had a job, and I didn't want to lose it for him if he was just running his mouth, which was a thing he specialized in. I told Sadie I was going over to the book depository tomorrow. Today. Now. Just to check up on him. She said she'd come with me. I said no. If Lee really was off his rocker and meant to do something, she could be in danger. "Did he seem off his rocker when you had lunch with him?" Fritz asked. "No. Cool as a cucumber, but he always was." I leaned toward him. "I want you to listen to this part very closely, Detective Fritz. I knew she meant to go with me, no matter what I told her. I could hear it in her voice. So I just got the hell out. I did that to protect her, just in case. And this is an in case if there ever was one," the Sadie in my head whispered. She would live there until I saw her again in the flesh. I swore I would, no matter what. I thought I'd spend the night in a hotel, but the hotels were full. Then I thought of Mercedes Street. I'd turned in the key to 2706 where I lived, but I still had a key to 2703 across the street where Lee lived. He gave it to me so I could go in and water his plants. Hosty. "He had plants?" My attention was still fixed on Will Fritz. Sadie got alarmed when she found me gone from Eden Fallows. Deke did too, so he did call the police. Not just once, but several times. Each time, the cop who took his call told him to stop bullshitting and hung up. I don't know if anyone bothered to make a record of those calls, but Deke will tell you, and he has no reason to lie. Now Fritz was the one turning red. "If you knew how many death threats we had..." "I'm sure. And only so many men. Just don't tell me that if we'd called the police, Sadie would still be alive. Don't tell me that, okay?" He said nothing. "How did she find you?" Hosty asked. That was something I didn't have to lie about, and I didn't. They'd ask about the trip from Mercedes Street in Fort Worth to the book depository in Dallas. That was the part of my story most fraught with peril. I wasn't worried about the Studebaker cowboy. Sadie had cut him, but only after he tried to steal her purse. The car had been on its last legs, and I had a feeling the cowboy might not even come forward to report it stolen. Of course, we had stolen another one, but given the urgency of our errand, the police would surely not file charges in the matter. The press would crucify them if they tried. What I was worried about was the red Chevrolet, the one with tail fins like a woman's eyebrows. A trunk with a couple of suitcases in it could be explained away. We'd had dirty weekends at the Candlewood bungalows before, but if they got a look at Al Templeton's notebook, I didn't even want to think about that. There was a perfunctory knock on the door of the interview room, and one of the cops who'd brought me to the police station poked his head in. Behind the wheel of the cruiser, and while he and his buddy had been going through my personal belongings, He had looked stone-faced and dangerous, a blue suit right out of a crime movie. Now, unsure of himself and bug-eyed with excitement. I saw he was no more than 23 and still coping with the last of his adolescent acne. Behind him, I could see a lot of people, some in uniform, some not, craning for a look at me. Fritz and Hosty turned to the uninvited newcomer with impatience. "Sirs, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Mr. Amberson has a phone call." The flush returned to Hosty's jowls, full force. "Son, we're doing an interrogation here. I don't care if it's the President of the United States calling." The cop swallowed. His Adam's apple went up and down like a monkey on a stick. Sirs, it is the President of the United States." It seemed they cared, after all. They took me down the hall to Chief Curry's office. Fritz had me under one arm and Hosty had the other. With them supporting 60 or 70 pounds of my weight between them, I hardly limped at all. There were reporters, TV cameras, and huge lights that must have raised the temperature to 100 degrees. These people, one step above paparazzi, had no place in a police station in the wake of an assassination attempt. But I wasn't surprised. Along another timeline, they had crowded in after Oswald's arrest, and no one had kicked them out. As far as I knew, no one had even suggested it. Hosty and Fritz bulled their way through the scrum, stone-faced. Questions were hurled at them and at me. Hosty shouted, "Mr. Amberson will have a statement after he's been fully debriefed by the authorities." "When?" someone shouted. "Tomorrow, or the day after, maybe next week." There were groans. They made Hosty smile. "Maybe next month. Right now, he's got President Kennedy waiting on the line, so you all fall back." They fell back, chattering like magpies. The only cooling device in Chief Curry's office was a fan on a bookshelf, but the moving air felt blessed after the interrogation room and the media microwave in the hall. A big black telephone handset lay on the blotter. Beside it was a file with Lee H. Oswald printed on the tab. It was thin. I picked up the phone. "Hello?" The nasal New England voice that responded sent a chill up my back. This was a man who would have now been lying on a morgue slab, if not for Sadie and me. "Mr. Amberson? Jack Kennedy here. I understand that my wife and I owe you our lives. I also understand that you lost someone very dear to you." Her name was Sadie Dunhill, Mr. President. Oswald shot her. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Mr. Amberson. May I call you George?" "If you like," thinking I'm not having this conversation. It's a dream. "Her country will give her a great outpouring of thanks, and you a great outpouring of condolence. Let me be the first to offer both." "Thank you, Mr. President." My throat was closing, and I could hardly speak above a whisper. I saw her eyes, so bright as she lay dying in my arms. Jake, how we danced. Do presidents care about things like that? Do they even know about them? Maybe the best ones do. Maybe it's why they serve. "There's someone else who wants to thank you, George. My wife's not here right now, but she plans to call you tonight." "Mr. President, I'm not sure where I'll be tonight." "She'll find you. She's very determined when she wants to thank someone. Now, tell me, George, how are you?" I told him I was all right, which I was not. He promised to see me at the White House very shortly, and I thanked him, but I didn't think any White House visit was going to happen. All during that dreamlike conversation, while the fan blew on my sweaty face and the pebbled glass upper panel of Chief Curry's door glowed with the supernatural light of the TV lights outside, 2 words beat in my brain. I'm safe. I'm safe. I'm safe. The President of the United States had called from Austin to thank me for saving his life, and I was safe. I could do what I needed to do. 5 minutes after concluding my surreal conversation with John Fitzgerald Kennedy, Hosty and Fritz were hustling me down the back stairs and into the garage, where Oswald would have been shot by Jack Ruby. Then it had been crowded in anticipation of the assassin's transfer to the county jail. Now it was so empty our footsteps echoed. My minders drove me to the Adolphus Hotel, and I felt no surprise when I found myself in the same room I'd occupied when I first came to Dallas. Everything that goes around comes around, they say, and, although I've never been able to figure out who the mysteriously wise sages known as they might be, they're certainly right when it comes to time travel. Fritz told me the cops posted in the corridor and below in the lobby were strictly for my own protection and to keep the press away. Then he shook my hand. Agent Hosty also shook my hand. And when he did, I felt a folded square of paper pass from his palm to mine. "Get some rest," he said. "You've earned it." When they were gone, I unfolded the tiny square. It was a page from his notebook. He'd written 3 sentences, probably while I was on the phone with Jack Kennedy. "Your phone is tapped. I will see you at 9 p.m. Burn this and flush the ashes." I burned the note as Sadie had burned mine, then picked up the phone and unscrewed the mouthpiece. Inside, clinging to the wires, was a small blue cylinder no bigger than a AA battery. I was amused to see that the writing on it was Japanese. It made me think of my old pal Silent Mike. I jiggered it loose, put it in my pocket, screwed the mouthpiece back on, and dialed 0. There was a very long pause at the operator's end after I said my name. I was about to hang up and try again when she started crying and babbling her thanks for saving the president. If she could do anything, she said, if anyone in the hotel could do anything, all I had to do was call. Her name was Marie. She would do anything to thank me. "You could start by putting through a call to Jody," I said, and gave her Deke's number. "Of course, Mr. Amberson. God bless you, sir. I'm connecting your call." The phone burred twice, then Deke answered. His voice was heavy and laryngeal, as if his bad cold had gotten worse. "If this is another goddamn reporter—" "It's not Deke, it's me, George." I paused. "Jake." "Oh, Jake," he said mournfully, and then he started to cry. I waited, holding the phone so tightly it hurt my hand. My temples throbbed. The day was dying, but the light coming in through the windows was still too bright. In the distance I heard a rumble of thunder. Finally he said, "Are you all right?" "Yes. But Sadie—" "I know. It's on the news. I heard while I was on my way to Fort Worth." So the woman with the baby carriage and the tow truck driver from the Esso station had done as I'd hoped they would. Thank God for that. Not that it seemed very important as I sat listening to this heartbroken old man try to control his tears. "Deke, do you blame me? I'd understand if you do." "No," he said at last. "Ellie doesn't either. When Sadie made up her mind to a thing, she carried through. And if you were on Mercedes Street in Fort Worth, I was the one who told her how to find you." "I was there." Did the son of a bitch shoot her? They say on the newscast that he did. Yes. He meant to shoot me, but my bad leg, I tripped over a box or something and fell down. She was right behind me. Christ. His voice strengthened a bit. But she died doing the right thing. That's what I'm going to hold on to. It's what you have to hold on to as well. Without her, I never would have gotten there. If you could have seen her, how determined she was, how brave. Christ, he repeated. It came out in a sigh. He sounded very, very old. It was all true. Everything you said. And everything she said about you. You really are from the future, aren't you? How glad I was that the bug was in my pocket. I doubted if they'd had time to plant listening devices in the room itself, but I still cupped my hand to the mouthpiece and lowered my voice. Not a word about any of that to the police or the reporters. Good God, no. He sounded indignant at the very idea. You'd never breathe free air again. Did you go ahead and get our luggage out of the Chevy's trunk? Even after? You bet I knew it was important, because as soon as I heard, I knew you'd be under suspicion. I think I'll be all right, I said. But you need to open my briefcase. And do you have an incinerator? Yes, behind the garage. There's a blue notebook in the briefcase. Put it in the incinerator and burn it. Will you do that for me? And for Sadie, we're both depending on you. Yes, I will. Jake, I'm so sorry for your loss. And I'm sorry for yours. Yours and Miss Ellie's. It's not a fair trade, he burst out. I don't care if he is the president. It's not a fair trade. No, I said. It's not. But, Deke, it wasn't just about the president. It's about all the bad stuff that would have happened if he had died. I guess I have to take your word for that. But it's hard. I know. Would they have a memorial assembly for Sadie at the high school, as they had for Miss Mimi? Of course they would. The networks would send camera crews, and there wouldn't be a dry eye in America. But when the show was over, Sadie would still be dead. Unless I changed it. It would mean going through everything again, but for Sadie, I'd do that. Even if she took one look at me at the party where I'd met her and decided I was too old for her, although I would do my best to change her mind about that. There was even an upside. Now that I knew Lee really had been the lone gunman, I wouldn't have to wait so long to dispatch his sorry ass. Jake, are you still there? Yes. And remember to call me George when you talk about me, okay? No fear there. I may be old, but my brains still work pretty well. Am I going to see you again? Not if Agent Hosty tells me what I want to hear, I thought. If you don't, it's because things are working out for the best. All right. Jake, George, did she say anything at the end? I wasn't going to tell him what her final words had been. That was private. But I could give him something. He would pass it on to Ellie, and Ellie would pass it on to all Sadie's friends in Jody. She'd had many. She asked if the president was safe. When I told her he was, she closed her eyes and slipped away. Deke began to cry again. My face was throbbing. Tears would have been a relief, but my eyes were as dry as stones. Goodbye, I said. Goodbye, old friend. I hung up gently and sat still for quite some time, watching the light of a Dallas sunset fall red through the window. Red sky at night, sailor's delight. The old saying has it, but I heard another rumble of thunder. 5 minutes later, when I had myself under control, I picked up my debugged phone and once again dialed 0. I told Marie I was going to lie down and asked for an 8 o'clock wake-up call. I also asked her to put a do not disturb on the phone until then. "Oh, that's already taken care of," she said excitedly. "No incoming calls to your room. Orders from the police chief." Her voice dropped a register. "Was he crazy, Mr. Amberson? I mean, he must have been, but did he look it?" I remembered the cheated eyes and demonic snarl. "Oh, yes," I said. "He certainly did." 8 o'clock, Marie. Nothing until then. I hung up before she could say anything else. Then I took off my shoes. Getting free of the left one was a slow and painful process. Lay down on the bed and put my arm over my eyes. I saw Sadie dancing to Madison. I saw Sadie telling me to come in, kind sir. Did I like pound cake? I saw her in my arms, her bright, dying eyes turned up to my face. I thought about the rabbit hole and how every time you used it, there was a complete reset. At last, I slept. Hostie's knock came promptly at 9. I opened up, and he ambled in. He carried a briefcase in one hand, but not my briefcase, so that was still all right. In the other was a bottle of champagne, the good stuff, Moet et Chandon, with a red, white, and blue bow tied around the neck. He looked very tired. "Amberson," he said. "Hostie," I responded. He closed the door, then pointed to the phone. I took the bug from my pocket and displayed it. He nodded. "There are no others?" I asked. "No. That bug is DPD's. And this is now our case. Orders straight from Hoover. If anyone asks about the phone bug, you found it yourself." "Okay." He held up the champagne. "Compliments of the management. They insisted I bring it up. Would you care to toast the President of the United States?" Considering that my beautiful Sadie now lay on a slab in the county morgue, I had no interest in toasting anything. I had succeeded, and success tasted like ashes in my mouth. "No." "Me either. But I'm glad as hell he's alive. Want to know a secret?" "Sure." "I voted for him. I may be the only agent in the whole Bureau who did." I said nothing. Hostie seated himself in one of the room's 2 armchairs and gave a long sigh of relief. He set his briefcase between his feet, then turned the bottle so he could read the label. 1958. Wine fanciers would probably know if that was a good year, but I'm more of a beer man myself." "So am I." "Then you might enjoy the Lone Star they're holding for you downstairs. There's a case of the stuff, and a framed letter promising you a case a month for the rest of your life. More champagne, too. I saw at least a dozen bottles. Everyone from the Dallas Chamber of Commerce to the City Board of Tourism sent them. You have a Zenith color television still in the carton, a solid gold signet ring with a picture of the president in it from Callaway's fine jewelry, a certificate for 3 new suits from Dallas Menswear, and all kinds of other stuff, including a key to the city. The management has set aside a room on the first floor for your swag, and I'm guessing that by dawn tomorrow they'll have to set aside another. And the food? People are bringing cakes, pies, casseroles, roasts of beef, barbecue chicken, and enough Mexican to give you the runs for 5 years. We're turning them away, and they hate to go, let me tell you. There are women out there in front of the hotel that, well, let's just say Jack Kennedy himself would be envious, and he's a legendary coxman. If you knew what the director has in his files on that man's sex life, you wouldn't believe it. My capacity for belief might surprise you. Dallas loves you, Emerson. Hell, the whole country loves you. He laughed. The laugh turned into a cough. When it passed, he lit a cigarette. Then he looked at his watch. As of 9:07 Central Time, on the evening of November 22nd, 1963, you are America's fair-haired boy. What about you, Hosty? Do you love me? Does Director Hoover? He set his cigarette aside in the ashtray after a single drag, then leaned forward and pinned me with his eyes. They were deep-set in folds of flesh, and they were tired, but they were nonetheless very bright and aware. Look at me, Emerson, dead in the eyes. Then tell me if you were or weren't in on it with Oswald, and make it the truth, because I'll know a lie. Given his egregious mishandling of Oswald, I didn't believe that, but I believed that he believed it. So I locked onto his gaze and said, I was not. For a moment he said nothing. Then he sighed, settled back, and picked up his cigarette. No, you weren't. He jetted smoke from his nostrils. Who do you work for, then? The CIA? The Russians, maybe? I don't see it myself, but the director believes the Russians would gladly burn a deep-cover asset in order to stop an assassination that would spark an international incident. Maybe even World War III. Especially when folks find out about Oswald's time in Russia. He said it, Russia, the way the televangelist Hargis did on his broadcasts. Maybe it was Hosty's idea of a jest. I said, I work for no one. I'm just a guy, Hosty. He pointed his cigarette at me. Hold that thought. He unstrapped his briefcase and took out a file even thinner than the one on Oswald I'd spied in Curry's office. This file would be mine. And it would thicken, but not as quickly as it would have done in the computer-driven 21st century. Before Dallas, you were in Florida, the town of Sunset Point. Yes. You substitute taught in the Sarasota school system. Correct. Before that, we believe you spent some time in, was it Darren? Darren, Maine? Derry. Where you did exactly what? Where I started my book. Uh-huh. And before that? Here and there, all around the square. How much do you know about my dealings with Oswald Emerson? I kept silent. Don't play it so cozy. It's just us girls. Enough to cause trouble for you and your director. Unless? Let me put it this way. The amount of trouble I cause you will be directly proportional to the amount of trouble you cause me. Would it be fair to say that when it came to making trouble, you'd make up what you didn't absolutely know, and to our detriment? I said nothing. He said, as if speaking to himself, It doesn't surprise me that you were writing a book. You should have carried on with it, Emerson. It probably would have been a bestseller because you're bloody good at making things up. I'll give you that. You were pretty plausible this afternoon, and you know things you have no business knowing, which is what makes us believe you're far from a private citizen. Come on. Who wound you up? Was it Angleton at the firm? It was, wasn't it? Sly, rose-growing bastard that he is. I'm just me, I said, and I probably don't know as much as you think. But yes, I know enough to make the Bureau look bad. How Lee told me, he came right out and told you that he was going to shoot Kennedy, for instance. Hosty stubbed out his cigarette hard enough to send up a fountain of sparks. Some landed on the back of his hand, but he didn't seem to feel them. That's a fucking lie. I know, I said, and I'll tell it with a straight face if you force me to. Has the idea of getting rid of me come up yet, Hosty? Spare me the comic book stuff. We don't kill people. Tell it to the Diem brothers over in Vietnam. He was looking at me the way a man might look at a seemingly inoffensive mouse that had suddenly bitten, and with big teeth. "How do you know America had anything to do with the Diem brothers? According to what I read in the papers, our hands are clean." Let's not get off the subject. The thing is, right now, I'm too popular to kill. Or am I wrong? No one wants to kill you, Amberson. And no one wants to poke holes in your story. He barked an unamused laugh. If we started doing that, the whole thing would unravel. That's how thin it is. Romance at short notice was her specialty, I said. Huh? H. Monroe, also known as Saki. The story is called The Open Window. Look it up. When it comes to the art of creating bullshit on the spur of the moment, it's very instructive. He scanned me, his shrewd little eyes worried. I don't understand you at all. That concerns me. In the west, out toward Midland, where the oil wells thump without surcease and the gas flares dim the stars, more thunder rumbled. What do you want from me? I asked. I think that when we trace you back a little farther from Darren or Derry or whatever it is, we're going to find nothing. As if you stepped right out of thin air. This was so close to the truth it nearly took my breath away. What we want is for you to go back to the nowhere you came from. The scandal press will gin up the usual nasty speculations and conspiracy theories, but we can guarantee you that you'll come out of this looking pretty good, if you even care about such things, that is. Marina Oswald will support your story, right down the line. You've already spoken to her, I take it. You take it right. She knows she'll be deported if she doesn't play ball. The gentlemen of the press haven't had a very good look at you. The photos that show up in tomorrow's papers are going to be little more than blurs. I knew he was right. I'd been exposed to the cameras only on that one quick walk down the hall to Chief Curry's office, and Fritz and Hosty, both big men, had me under the arms, blocking the best photo sightlines. Also, I'd had my head down because the lights were so bright. There were plenty of pictures of me and Jody, even a portrait shot in the yearbook from the year I'd taught there full time, but in this era before JPEGs or even faxes, it would be Tuesday or Wednesday of next week before they could be found and published. Here's a story for you, Hosty said. You like stories, don't you? Things like this open window. I'm an English teacher. I love stories. This fellow, George Amberson, is so stunned with grief over the loss of his girlfriend. Fiancé, right, even better. He's so grief-stricken that he ditches the whole works and simply disappears. Wants nothing to do with publicity, free champagne, medals from the president, or ticker-tape parades. He just wants to get away and mourn his loss in privacy. That's the kind of story Americans like. They see it on TV all the time. Instead of The Open Window, it's called The Modest Hero. And there's this FBI agent who's willing to back up every word and even read a statement that you left behind. How does that sound? It sounded like manna from heaven, but I held on to my poker face. You must be awfully sure I can disappear. We are. And you really mean it when you tell me I won't be disappearing to the bottom of the Trinity River as per the director's orders? Nothing like that. He smiled. It was meant to be reassuring, but it made me think of an old line from my teenage years. Don't worry, you won't get pregnant. I had the mumps when I was 14. Because I might have left a little insurance, Agent Hosty. One eyelid twitched. It was the only sign the idea distressed him. We think you can disappear, because we believe, let's just say, you could call on assistance once you were clear of Dallas. No press conference. Well, that's the last thing we want." He opened his briefcase again. From it, he took a yellow legal pad. He passed it over to me, along with a pen from his breast pocket. "Write me a letter, Amberson. It'll be Fritz and me who'll find it tomorrow morning when we come to pick you up, but you can head it, 'To whom it may concern.' Make it good. Make it genius. You can do that, can't you?" "Sure," I said. "Romance at short notice is my specialty." He grinned without humor and picked up the champagne bottle. "Maybe I'll try a little of this while you're romancing. None for you, after all. You're going to have a busy night, miles to go before you sleep and all that." I wrote carefully, but it didn't take long. In a case like this, not that there had ever in the whole history of the world been a case exactly like this, I thought shorter was better. I kept Hostie's modest hero idea foremost in my mind. I was very glad that I'd had a chance to sleep for a few hours. Such rest as I'd managed had been shot through with baleful dreams, but my head was relatively clear. By the time I finished, Hostie was on his third glass of bubbly. He had taken a number of items from his briefcase and placed them on the coffee table. I handed him the pad, and he began reading over what I'd written. Outside, the thunder rumbled again, and lightning briefly lit the night sky. But I thought the storm was still distant. While he read, I examined the stuff on the coffee table. There was my Timex, the one item that for some reason hadn't been returned with the rest of my personal effects when we left the cop shop. There was a pair of horn-rimmed spectacles. I picked them up and tried them on. The lenses were plain glass. There was a key with a hollow barrel instead of notches, an envelope containing what looked like about $1,000 in used 20s and 50s, a hairnet, and a white uniform in two pieces, pants and tunic. The cotton cloth looked as thin as Hostie had claimed my story to be. "This letter's good," Hostie said, putting the pad down. "You come across kind of sad, like Richard Kimball. On The Fugitive, you watch that one?" I'd seen the movie version with Tommy Lee Jones, but this hardly seemed the time to bring it up. "No." "You'll be a fugitive, all right, but only from the press, and an American public that's going to want to know all about you. From what kind of juice you drink in the morning to the waist size of your skivvies. You're a human interest story, Amberson. But you're not police business. You didn't shoot your girlfriend. You didn't even shoot Oswald." I tried. If I hadn't missed, she'd still be alive. "I wouldn't blame yourself too much on that score. That's a big room up there, and a .38 doesn't have much accuracy from a distance." True, you had to get within 15 yards. So I had been told, and more than once. But I didn't say so. I thought my brief acquaintanceship with Special Agent James Hostie was almost over. Basically, I couldn't wait. "You're clean. All you need to do is to get to some place where your people can pick you up and fly you away to Spook Neverland. Can you manage that?" Neverland, in my case, was a rabbit hole that would transport me 48 years into the future, assuming the rabbit hole was still there. "I believe I'll be okay." "You better be, because if you try to hurt us, it'll come back on you double. Mr. Hoover, let's just say that the director is not a forgiving man." "Tell me how I'm getting out of the hotel." "You'll put on those kitchen whites, the glasses, and the hairnet. The key runs the service elevator. It'll take you to B1. You walk straight through the kitchen and out the back door. You with me so far?" "Yes." "There'll be a bureau car waiting for you. Get in the back seat. You don't talk to the driver. This ain't no limousine service. Off you go to the bus station. Your driver can offer you one of 3 tickets: Tampa at 11:40, Little Rock at 11:50, or Albuquerque at 20 past midnight. I don't want to know which one. All you need to know is that's where our association ends. Your responsibility to stay out of sight becomes all your own, and whoever it is you work for, of course." Of course. The telephone rang. "If it's some smart-ass reporter who found a way to ring through, get rid of him," Hosty said. "And if you say a word about me being here, I'll cut your throat." I thought he was joking about that, but wasn't entirely sure. I picked up the phone. "I don't know who this is, but I'm pretty tired right now, so—" The breathy voice on the other end said she wouldn't keep me long. To Hosty, I mouthed, "Jackie Kennedy." He nodded and poured a little more of my champagne. I turned away as if by presenting Hosty with my back I could keep him from overhearing the conversation. "Mrs. Kennedy, you really didn't have to call," I said, "but I'm honored to hear from you just the same." "I wanted to thank you for what you did," she said. "I know that my husband has already thanked you on our behalf, but—" "Mr. Emerson," the First Lady began to cry, "I wanted to thank you on behalf of our children who were able to say good night to their mother and dad on the phone tonight. Carolyn and John, they'd never crossed my mind until that moment. Mrs. Kennedy, you're more than welcome. I understand. The young woman who died was to become your wife." "That's right." "You must be heartbroken. Please accept my condolences. They aren't enough, I know that, but they are all I have to offer. Thank you. If I could change it, if in any way I could turn back the clock." "No," I thought, "that's my job, Miss Jackie. I understand. Thank you." We talked a little longer. This call was much more difficult than the one with Kennedy at the police station, partly because that one had felt like a dream and this one didn't. But mostly, I think it was the residual fear I heard in Jacqueline Kennedy's voice. She truly seemed to understand what a narrow escape they'd had. I'd gotten no sense of that from the man himself. He seemed to believe he was providentially lucky, blessed, maybe even immortal. Toward the end of the conversation, I remember asking her to make sure her husband quit riding in open cars for the duration of his presidency. She said I could count on that, then thanked me one more time. I told her she was welcome one more time, then hung up the phone. When I turned around, I saw I had the room to myself. At some point while I'd been talking to Jacqueline Kennedy, Hosty had left. All that remained of him were 2 butts in the ashtray, a half-finished glass of champagne, and another scribbled note lying beside the yellow legal pad with my "To Whom It May Concern" letter on it. "Get rid of the bug before you go into the bus station," it read. And below that, "Good luck, Emerson. Very sorry for your loss. H." Maybe he was. But sorry is cheap, isn't it? Sorry is so cheap. I put on my kitchen potboy disguise and rode down to B1 in an elevator that smelled like chicken soup, barbecue sauce, and Jack Daniels. When the doors opened, I walked briskly through the steamy, fragrant kitchen. I don't think anyone so much as looked at me. I came out in an alley where a couple of winos were picking through a trash bin. They didn't look at me either, although they glanced up when sheet lightning momentarily brightened the sky. A nondescript Ford sedan was idling at the mouth of the alley. I got into the back seat, and off we went. The man behind the wheel said only one thing before pulling up to the Greyhound station. "Looks like rain." He offered me 3 tickets like a poor man's poker hand. I took the one for Little Rock. I had about an hour. I went into the gift shop and bought a cheap suitcase. If all went well, I'd eventually have something to put in it. I wouldn't need much. I had all sorts of clothes at my house in Sabattis, and although that particular domicile was almost 50 years in the future, I hoped to be there in less than a week. A paradox Einstein could love. And it never crossed my tired, grieving mind that, given the butterfly effect, it almost certainly would no longer be mine, if it was there at all. I also bought a newspaper, an extra edition of the Slimes Herald. There was a single photo, maybe snapped by a professional, more likely by some lucky bystander. It showed Kennedy bent over the woman I'd been talking to not long ago, the woman who'd had no blood stains on her pink suit when she'd finally taken it off this evening. John F. Kennedy shields his wife with his body as the presidential limo speeds away from what was nearly a national catastrophe, the caption read. Above this was a headline in 36-point type. There was room because it was only one word. Saved. I turned to page 2 and was confronted with another picture. This one was of Sadie, looking impossibly young and impossibly beautiful. She was smiling. "I have my whole life ahead of me," the smile said. Sitting in one of the slatted wooden chairs while late-night travelers surged around me and babies cried and servicemen with duffels laughed and businessmen got shines and the overhead speakers announced arrivals and departures, I carefully folded the newsprint around the borders of that picture so I could remove it from the page without tearing her face. When that much was accomplished, I looked at it for a long time, then folded it into my wallet. The rest of the paper I threw away. There was nothing in it I wanted to read. Boarding for the bus to Little Rock was called at 11:20, and I joined the crowd clustering around the proper door. Other than wearing the fake glasses, I made no attempt to hide my face, but no one looked at me with any particular interest. I was just one more cell in the bloodstream of Transit America, no more important than any other. I changed your lives today, I thought, as I watched those present at the turning of the day. But there was no triumph or wonder in the idea. It seemed to have no emotional charge at all, either positive or negative. I got on the bus and sat near the back. There were a lot of guys in uniform ahead of me, probably bound for Little Rock Air Force Base. If not for what we'd done today, some of them would have died in Vietnam. Others would have come home maimed. And now, who knew? The bus pulled out. When we left Dallas, the thunder was louder and the lightning brighter, but there was still no rain. By the time we reached Sulphur Springs, the threatening storm was behind us and the stars were out in their tens of thousands, brilliant as ice chips and twice as cold. I looked at them for a while, then leaned back, shut my eyes, and listened to the big dog's tires eating up Interstate 30. Sadie, the tires sang. Sadie, Sadie, Sadie. At last, sometime after 2 a.m, I slept. In Little Rock, I bought a ticket on the noon bus to Pittsburgh with a single stop in Indianapolis. I had breakfast in the depot diner near an old fellow who ate with a portable radio in front of him on the table. It was large and covered with shiny dials. The major story was still the attempted assassination, of course, and Sadie? Sadie was big, big news. She was to be given a state funeral, followed by interment at Arlington National Cemetery. There was speculation that JFK himself would deliver the eulogy. In related developments, Miss Dunhill's fiancé, George Amberson, also of Jody, Texas, had been scheduled to appear before the press at 10 a.m., but that had been pushed back to late afternoon, no reason given. Hosty was providing me all the room to run that he possibly could. Good for me. Him too, of course. And his precious director. The president and his heroic saviors aren't the only news coming out of Texas this morning, the old duffer's radio said. And I paused, with a cup of black coffee suspended halfway between the saucer and my lips. There was a sour tingle in my mouth that I'd come to recognize. A psychologist might have termed it presque-vu, the sense people sometimes get that something amazing is about to happen, but my name for it was much more humble, a harmony. At the height of a thunderstorm, shortly after 1 a.m., a freak tornado touched down in Fort Worth, destroying a Montgomery Ward warehouse and a dozen homes. 2 people are known dead, and 4 are missing. The 2 of the houses were 2703 and 2706 Mercedes Street, I had no doubt. An angry wind had erased them, like a bad equation.